This conference will now be recorded.
So I would like to call to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of February 20th, 2024. Well, I welcome you all, and the first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll start it one last time, huh? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2, instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency and a review of technology options.
So thank you for those joining us in the room. If there's an emergency in the room, you can go at the rear of the auditorium out the left or right side and then turn left or right to get outside. For those participating remotely, thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to speak during any item on the agenda, turn your camera on and the chair will call on you. You can also indicate you would like to make a comment in the chat box, and I will track that. Otherwise, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you. Item 3 is agenda review. Additions, deletions, or changes in order of agenda items. Yes.
I'd like to add an item. I have a beef with two certain ladies on the council that have decided not to seek re-election, and I'd like to discuss that after the consent agenda. The city's prepared 2 wonderful resolutions honoring your service, and I'd like to add that after the consent agenda.
Make that 6A already. I would like to make a recommendation that in the consent agenda, we take up item F, the letter of support to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and deal with that directly after the consent agenda, and then we can do yours. So mine will be 6A, the item F, and 6B will be whatever you have planned. Are there any other changes? Yes.
Ryan Doyle speaking. Tomorrow at the State House, they're going to be taking up discussion on a statewide rental registry. And I think from the Housing Affordability Committee meeting in January, I think Noah said that they're still considering a regular rental registry.
Yes, that's item 8. Do you want to save your remarks for then?
Actually, my question was given that the state is actively working on these things, would it make sense to table this until we have some clarity about what they're trying to do with those and if they pass them this session? That's my take.
Well,
Actively working on this for over 5 years, so I would like us to keep that.
yeah, you can bring it up when we discuss it, I guess. Okay, are there any other changes? All in favor of the 2 additions, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll move on to comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. Yes, Michael.
Short and sweet because it's a repeat, but it's probably the last time you'll hear this from me as you're currently constituted. This is a follow-up on the Wheeler conservation easement. I haven't heard anything recently or in several weeks, and I wonder where we are on that. And the second item is the Hubbard Park easement and what's transpired between the city and the Lake Champlain Land Trust, which signified that they were very interested in and would love to be the easement holder. So those are my 2 questions, and I wondered whether I could get an update because I don't want to keep coming back month after month.
We can definitely give you an update on one. Do you want to?
Sure, I can give an update on both. So Friday afternoon, we received the survey for the Wheeler Natural Area Conservation Area from the surveyor. As they've been working on this for many, many months, and it was sent off to the land trust first thing this morning. So that was the final piece the land trust needed to start their part of the paperwork. So that has been delivered today. Hubbard Park, I reached out to the Lake Champlain Land Trust probably now 3 weeks ago and have not heard back from them yet. So I will poke them again.
You want somebody to follow up with them?
Sure, I would love that. Thank you, Michael.
2 pokes might push them ahead. Okay.
Can we just say, Michael, nice haircut? Nice haircut.
It is. It's all combed and neat.
They needed it.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other items? Oh, Karen.
It's Karen.
Karen,
All right.
sorry.
My name is Karen Sita. I am chosen. I am anointed. I am gifted. I was a long-term resident of the town of South Burlington. Like the first Black woman to be a legislator for the state of Vermont, also came from South Burlington. I am one of the many Black women that will come out of Burlington, South Burlington, and do great things. To keep my public comment short, I do want to say that the town of South Burlington for many years have been very, very wicked. And I don't have time for all the wickedness. Jessie Baker, she knows the wickedness. She might even be part of that. But anyways, I do want to say that whatever is done in the dark always comes to light. And if you look around this year, 2024 is a year of revealing. So I just want to make sure that when the city council gets many reports of what they have done behind the scenes, when nobody's watching, when they think nobody's going to watch, or when they think that, like Johnny Cash, my favorite song, sooner or later, God does cut you down, they must be prepared for that. Because for many times they think they're getting away with it, but they get away with nothing. Anything that's done in the dark always comes to light. And, I just want to make sure that, I came from the city of South Burlington. I know the wickedness. And I just wanted to make that very clear, because they think somehow that they'll get away with it, but they never get away with nothing. Everything that's done in the dark comes to light. So city councilor, whoever you're going to be, hopefully Lydia Diamond, we're going to vote for Lydia Diamond, get a Black woman in there. But for all the city councilors, be prepared, because what's going to come to you is something you've never seen before in your life. So, and I knew it was pretty, but I didn't know it was this pretty. Oh my God, even with no makeup. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Be ready. Are you ready, Jessie? I know you are. Toodles.
Thank you. Are there any other items? Yes, Mike.
Mike Semino, South Burlington resident. I didn't, maybe I didn't understand at the beginning when you were amending the agenda. Thank you. Amending the agenda a little bit. But the matter that I wanted to ask a question about is on the consent agenda F. So did you tweak that? Is that still on
I
the?
took it off the consent agenda so you can speak
Oh.
as soon as we adopt it.
Okay.
Agenda.
Oh, as soon, okay, so you took it off.
A now.
It's
It's a new agenda item. That
It's a
we'll
new
get to
agenda
after the
item.
consent.
We amended the agenda
Okay, all
and
right,
added 2 items.
all right. So it is still there. It is still there. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Moving on to counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the city manager's report. Larry, you want to start tonight?
Thank you. I had a chance to attend 2 committee meetings. The Rec and Parks Committee, and during that time, they did express concern and interest in the Hubbard Park easement discussion, and they want to be kept informed of that. I'm just looking at these notes here. Very good. Great. So I think that was the highlight of that meeting for me. And Natural Resources Committee met, and I want to just publicly thank Dave Wheeler for being such a good staff person to that committee, because he really he goes out of is beyond his job description as the stormwater person, but we've learned a lot about stormwater in that committee for sure. It's great. And he did say that one highlight of that meeting, he did say that the ash tree replacement, anything grows, we had that discussion that he announced that a reward, and that said that the ash tree injection plan is going out to bid.
Oh, great.
So there are ash trees to be preserved, hopefully through an injection process. And he mentioned that the March meeting should include a joint meeting with Rec and Parks to just start discussing the open space, the joint meeting of open space and master planning that goes along with spaces, public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan?
Nothing to report on committees.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Thank you. So a few things. I attended the candidate forum last Thursday night, and Andy was able to provide me with a link for the recording, which I put on Front Porch Forum to all the fora, saying, please go watch this if you want to learn about the candidates. I just want to give some credit to the DPW for their improvement of all the Dorset lights signals from Kennedy Drive all the way down to, so far that I can tell, at least Market Street. It flows much faster now. There's less wait time when there are no cars in lanes waiting to turn. So I really appreciate it. I think other drivers do. Thank you very much. That's part of that long-term project that's been, it was stalled out because of the pandemic, right? But it's...
That is a long term.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it a long time.
So I think that, there was a 30-day, warranty period where they kept it on the old system, then they switched it to the new using the sensors. And so those are in effect now. So that's really great. I noticed that a bunch of signs appeared on median strips and on the roadways today. It just came out of nowhere, advertising for candidates. So it's that time of the year. I attended an economic development meeting last week. There was discussion about the gallium nitride tech hub and the funding for that. And it just happens to be that today, or yesterday was the day that the U.S. government announced that the CHIPS program was going to make available to Global Foundries a large sum of money for the Malta site and also for the Burlington site. So there was a company-wide broadcast today that I watched, and Gina Raimondo was there, Chuck Schumer was there, Kathy Hochul was there, our CEO was there, and there were a couple of other, there was a congressman, I didn't get his last name. So that was a huge announcement for the support of semiconductor manufacturing in upstate New York and also in the Champlain Valley, right? So this whole area is connected now to make these high-tech wafers. In fact, one point Schumer held up, he held up a wafer, 12-inch wafer, that had been completed, but it wasn't, and he goes, I remember when Saratoga only had a potato chip factory, and he held up this bag of potato chips, and he's going, potato chips, semiconductor chips. He went back and forth. It was pretty funny. So anyway, but this tech hub that would be in this area is really important because it would give access to design services in one building to any startups that wanted to try and create chips using gallium nitride, and then Global Foundries, Burlington would, or the Essex Junction plant would be the place to pilot that work. So this is a really interesting way. It's a good synergy for the companies that offer the design services and all the technical, and plus you take into account then also the UVM has now a new lab that was opened by
New program.
with Global Foundries. So not to push my employer, but these are all good economic developments for the region. So and they're all high tech, so this is good. That's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Congratulations.
Congrats, yeah. Andrew?
I attended 2 committee meetings, Bike Ped and the Energy Committee. At the Energy Committee, a large piece of discussion focused on EV charging standards for new buildings. The Transportation Climate Action Implementation Group had recommended perhaps strengthening those standards. Right now, the requirement is, I think, for most buildings, multifamily, 25% be what's called EV capable, which means you run some conduit. Question is whether you should also run the wire. That's called EV ready. I think that makes sense. I think the Energy Committee thinks it makes sense. So Energy Committee recommended to the Planning Commission to take that up and explore strengthening those standards. At the Bike PED meeting, the most of the discussion focused around Dorset Street in front of the two schools and the safety and pedestrian improvements that Hoyle Tanner was recommending, including potentially an island, pedestrian island, consolidating some of the crosswalks, some striping, some lighting. Those recommendations will be reviewed by the Joint City School Task Force next week, but I think they were very well received, very thoughtful, and responded to a lot of community comments. Tom
That's
could
fine.
Tom will
Very good
provide
at saying.
Tom will provide news about what implementing those improvements mean with respect to the paving schedule, and I won't steal his thunder on that. What they might mean. Finally, I did attend the Joint City School Bike Ped Safety Task Force where we talked about Dorset Street, and we also began a discussion with respect to crossing guards and reviewed materials around the country in terms of best practices and policies with the goal of making a joint recommendation as to where we should be locating crossing guards in the city for the schools.
Great. Okay. I also attended the candidates night and the common area for dogs meeting. And just to update some of you who've been at dog parks and what we do with dogs for a long time, the six benches have been ordered, and I think they've been received, but they won't be installed till spring. They also are going to have the tree stumps in the dog park chunked out, in the spring. Get a stump, whatever they call it, and grind them out. They have installed some dog bag stations, and several more have been ordered, and water jugs that you attach to the fence have been ordered and received. The what do you call those squares where you can put your phone against them and
Oh, the charger?
no, not the chargers, the QR codes. We did have a discussion on those, and I think the QR code will probably, it sounds like it should only be actually installed at Wheeler Park, so you can put it behind glass and people can't take it down, because we were told that it's really easy. If you just sort of put it on a fence post or something on a piece of paper, someone can make one that looks really similar and replace it. And then if you put your phone up and say, oh, I want to give money to the dog park committee, it could go to somebody else. So just thinking about where we use those and how you use them, they need to be under lock and key so they can't be changed. And I had no idea that happened, but I guess you have to be young to know that. I also attended an airport commission meeting. We received the audit and it was totally clean, just like our city. So that's always nice to know. We did not get a really big grant to continue with the planning for the North Terminal. Doesn't mean it's dead, it's just they ran out of money. So it's still on the list or will be applied for. And then I did attend the Planning Commission meeting, which was really, really interesting because they were talking about all the changes that potentially need to be considered for our LDRs to be aligned with some of the housing legislation that the legislators passed last year. So that was kind of interesting to have that run through, and they'll be busy working on that. Not it didn't seem like it was a huge number of changes, but we want to make sure that it's really done systematically and carefully, and then they'll add some more stuff this year, but that can always be a reoccurring nightmare for the planning commission. That's all I attended.
Thank you. So a couple updates for the council and the community. One, just a reminder, town meeting day is quickly coming up on our city webpage. We have a town meeting day dedicated site where you can find budget information, presentation information from town meeting TV. You can find the candidate forum link all in one place. So if you have questions about what will be on your ballot on town meeting day, please check that out. Just a reminder, tomorrow or next Monday night, the 26th, from 4 to 6, we will be at Duke's to celebrate our 2 retiring counselors. The Eau Claire conservation closing took place on January 29th. It's all completed and wrapped up. So just wanted to circle back that that was completed. Our staff is working with Chittenden County Regional Planning in anticipation of the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development setting statewide 2030 and 2050 housing targets. This is part of Act 47. So we are participating in those conversations. So as those allocations are made statewide, we have been at the table from the beginning. Dorset Street, want to steal the thunder of Tom, I guess. So a couple of things. One, signal project is wrapping up and will be substantially complete in March. Paving of Dorset Street. So right now, the phase 4 of the paving project from Aspen to Kennedy was originally scheduled to be repaved this year. To accommodate some of the school safety changes we want to make as part of that project, it is likely that we will need to delay that to summer 2025 to integrate that engineering into the plans. So that's still under discussion, part of what Councillor Chonlick talked about at the Safe Routes to School Task Force and the Bike Ped Task Force. But with adding in those elements, the bid environment will be much better to repave it in the summer of 2025. Having said that, there are things that we anticipate being able to do to improve school safety this year in advance of that paving effort. So as Soil Tanner's recommendations come forward, we will bring those to the council to establish the school zone and move that effort forward. But wanted to get out, start talking about that paving project being in 2025. I would really encourage folks to check out the programming being offered through the Recreation and Parks Department and through the libraries. There is a lot going on in the next couple of months from a community connectivity standpoint. I'm not going to list them all today. I do want to thank those who came out to our Valentine's Day dance. We had 150 attendees on February 10th, which was lovely. Also want to thank Delta Dental for sponsoring Recreation and Parks to do a free family event every month for the rest of the calendar year, which is really lovely. And then also thank the University Mall, who is giving us free access to indoor space. As we don't have an indoor recreation center now, they are partnering with us to give us indoor space for free for some targeted programming throughout the spring. So be on the lookout for that as well. And wonderful. Well done to our Recreation Parks Director, Adam Math, for some real creative thinking there.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, the consent agenda. We have 5 items still left on there. Consider and sign the disbursements, approval of minutes from January 8th, 2024, receive the December and January financials, receive the first and second quarter financial report, and lastly, approve documents related to loan RF1-354-2.0 for the Bartlett Bay wastewater treatment plant upgrade.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just have a question about the financials. Jesse and I, would that be appropriate now, Jesse, that back and forth that we had a little bit on that?
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if Martha can answer it, or in the financials there's a note, and it talks.
Oh, you're talking about the audit.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
no,
that later?
that's later in
that's,
the agenda.
That's fine. Okay. Okay. We can do that later.
yeah, no, these were just the financials.
Oh, that's item 12. Never mind.
Okay. Okay, so are you ready? I'll entertain a motion to approve. We
I
have
already
that in
did.
a second. I'm sorry. So you're ready for the vote?
Yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, so we will take up what was item F, the letter in support of the South Burlington Land Trust application for conservation funding through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board in support of the Long property. And I know there's some people who have both written us several times and complained about this. I want to clarify and dispel some of what I consider misinformation in the public about this. And it's troubling for, I think, particularly for probably Megan and myself, for the last month to all of a sudden get the salvos that this council does things behind closed doors, that we're not transparent, that somehow things are done and approved not in broad daylight. And I want to say very sincerely, I've spent 30 years in public life, and being transparent and clear and not lying about anything or covering anything up has been the hallmark of what I think was a long and well-considered career. So to have people suggest that somehow in when we were discussing an executive session, a conversation about potentially the purchase of property, that we somehow were working in the dark and not sharing that with the public. The Long property has been on our agenda for probably a year and a half. This council, when it was in interim zoning and there were plans for development, we pushed back on, I think it was 7 or 8 houses, 6 at the top of the ridge. And at that point, the developer said, I can't make it work, and walked away. Then the property was bought. And my understanding is that at the closing, the Longs were very, very happy. They were glad it was going to be conserved, and they got what they wanted out of the property, and they were happy. I've heard comments that, they're really annoyed because it didn't get developed. I think the people who are annoyed, perhaps, are the developers. But that was a private transaction. I think when after we had executive session or before, when we did talk with the Bellavances about their property, I made it very clear we were not making a decision that evening, and there would be no decision made during executive session. During that meeting, what we did suggest is what we heard from the public that evening, and that is you really should look for other funding for this project. And that's exactly what they did. They withdrew their proposal to us and then had approached, thanks to Jesse, who connected them and was at the meeting, with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to discuss what are some potentials for them and for the board. They fund projects like this. I was told that the board members who came, or the staff who came, were ecstatic because it was exactly the kind of project that they like to consider. So to then get some letters that suggest that this shouldn't happen and go forward, and that we shouldn't, for some reason, sign a letter of support for conservation that we have done numerous times, is startling to me. It doesn't make sense. Some of the accusations and the considerations of what might have happened in this application were just guesses. And to put that in a letter as if, well, this probably could happen. Well, I don't think you put that in a letter and suggest that there's some malfeasance if you don't know the facts. So I'm telling you tonight, the facts are, and I've read the application, it has nothing to do right now with housing, although they're asked about affordable housing. And they have, Janet has, and in the application, has said point blank, housing is the second phase. This is a 2-phase project. We're going to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board for money for the property. We have no other money promises from this council, from our open space fund. We've never agreed to that. It definitely, if there is any opportunity for that, it will be in the future, and it will be the next council who gets to decide that. There's nothing behind closed doors. In fact, Janet has said when we go to the housing option, they want to make it 100% affordable, which is a hell of a lot better than working with a developer who's only required to make 10% affordable. So if you're interested in affordable housing, I think potentially this could be a wonderful project. But this letter of support is only to support their application to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board in support of 32.2, I think, acres for perpetual conservation. That's something that this council, I think, has talked about in general, that easements and taking open space and perpetually preserving that is the only way you really can preserve it for our future and for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to enjoy. So that's what I wanted to say about this topic. I don't think I can be any more clear. Do you have anything to add? Okay, is there any public comment? Michael?
I'd like to thank you for setting that out so clearly. And I'm surprised that people have said you're doing things behind closed doors. This was all published in the other paper. You can't be more transparent than that. So I think I'm surprised to hear that you've received criticism. Obviously, whoever sent you the letters didn't have the facts.
Correct.
And I, for one, would very much like to see you send this letter of support. And there's one typo in it. In the first paragraph on the third line, it's something that I do quite often because I'm dyslexic. It's conversation instead of conservation. That's all I have to say, but thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other comments? Sandy?
Well, I would like to take exception to a characterization that I like anything as factual regarding what is in, isn't it on there?
In the South Burlington Land Trust application, because I have no idea what's in the application. And that is the heart of the problem, is that the first that I knew that there was going to be an application and that the city was going to submit a letter of support was when the agenda for this meeting was announced last Friday. And I think the lack of information about the city's role, the lack of the fact that it was announced as housing and conservation. The letter of support says nothing about housing. Have no idea what the application says. There's just so much unknown about what the proposal is and what the role of the city is. So I still think that submitting a letter of support for something the community, other than you folks and the sellers, have, and South Burlington Land Trust, no one else has an understanding of what is proposed, is it just simply doesn't comply with transparency. And it's fine with me to disagree respectfully on that, but I know there are others who are very troubled by the lack of transparency in this process. Thank you.
Well, I think if you want to read the application, you can call the Housing Trust Fund and ask them for an application. They typically are not shared.
It's not available.
Yeah. And
Well,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
Let me know that.
but I think if you want to know what this city has committed itself to, you can read our minutes and you will see nothing in the minutes. And the only thing that we might commit ourselves to is this letter of support, and that will be in the minutes. And that is how it has always been on the council ever since I began in 2008. So I am concerned that there has been misinformation, and I will use that term as well. And
I'd be happy to have you enumerate the misinformation.
Well, I think in your letter, you fantasized about what could be in this proposal.
And I was very clear that
I know. And Sandy, to do that, to me, that's kind of like what Trump is doing.
Yeah.
It's an innuendo. It's this could happen. Maybe. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but what if? And I'm telling you, our letter of support is for conservation of the 32.2 acres. And that's all it is. And that is consistent with what we've done on innumerable letters of support for different nonprofit organizations. So, it's a private family who was working with, I think, a highly reputable organization who would never enter into a contract or an awarding or agreeing with any organization if they felt that there was it didn't adhere to the community's rules and regulations on land use. And that's what your first letter said. So I think it just got worse from there. But we can disagree. I find this an important thing for the council to support, and there is no way that this commits us to anything in the future until the council has a conversation and agrees that, yes, let's spend open space money or
which always happens in open session. Always. Those votes always happen in open session. And I want that to be clear to the public. It has been very insulting to read these letters to the editor and to read the letters that we have received in our inbox, which are open and public documents. And to have others say, oh, what Sandy says.
Yes. Andrew.
Thank you, Helen and Megan. We're going to miss your leadership. I'll miss your leadership. Sandy, with all due respect, your letter said, submitting the letter of support appears to be a backdoor strategy for the council to decide to make this purchase and bind a future council to carry out the decision. It's just not true. It's and honestly, it's a bit of a smear. That's what you wrote in your letter. There's nothing that supports that. It's not true. It's not the way this council operates. And
No council can operate.
I think it's a really unfortunate thing to accuse us of, honestly.
Are there other comments? Mike?
Okay, same subject. And I actually know a lot more about what it is you're doing tonight than I've known through the entirety of this process. Maybe I didn't read an article that said you were concentrating on conserving 32 acres. Was there an article that said you were concentrating on conserving 32 acres or conserving the Long property?
We were talking about the Long property and the part of it that has real value.
Value to whom? I mean, there's value to folks.
I think we were pretty clear. It's value to
Excuse
the
me, excuse me. I know that it's hard to listen to people who have different opinions. And this is a collective statement. We all have that challenge at times. And so it can be a challenge to sit and wait and listen for somebody to share what they've got to share and to not be critical of them and question their motives. So getting back to my question, was there an article that talked about there being 32 acres that the city was concentrating their energy on conserving, or has the communications that's been out there in the public simply been referring to the Long property? Have I missed something? Yeah. If I have, I apologize, because I haven't seen any reference to 32 acres. And Mike, if you can bring that to my attention, I'm happy to say, I guess I overlooked that. I got no problem with that.
I'll let you finish.
Okay. So, but tonight, hearing 32 acres, that's the first I heard that. So ordinarily, if you look at a letter, I'm generally familiar with the process. I don't want to sound like I know it all again, but I'm generally familiar with the process when applications are submitted to the Housing Conservation Board. And although, there's a little bit of leeway there, the assumption is ordinarily that site control either exists or that it is imminent, because they receive a lot of applications. They don't want to waste their time. Like our city council, you like to have a complete application. So knowing that, seeing where there is a letter of support that our municipality is providing to an entity, the South Burlington Land Trust, who's submitting an application, it's not unreasonable for somebody to assume, hey, have these negotiations that have been
occurring or these conversations in executive session, have they been consummated? Is there a deal? It's not, I appreciate you saying no, but it's not unreasonable to think that there's been a meeting of the minds that's been reached. And then you come out of executive session, you put on the agenda, there's going to be an action item. And here, community, here's a deal.
No.
Here's
former
the
counselor
terms.
knows.
Here are terms and conditions, that you can take a look at and discuss. And so in any event, it's not unreasonable to think.
It is for a former counselor and a former council chair to think that. Yes, it is. She knows how city government works. She knows that any kind of deal would have been made in open session and would have been voted on.
If you look at this information
She's a
and you
council
recognize
chair.
what happens
2 years.
when the Housing Conservation Board, when there's an application submitted, there's ordinarily an expectation that site control exists or that it's imminent. Okay? That's not unreasonable for me to assume. So we come in here and we have a question. And we want to know what's going on. And you've introduced a bunch of information that I hadn't heard before. Again, the 32 acres and other stuff. So, I apologize for taking up your time. Okay, but this property, there are a lot of people in the community who have a different point of view about this entire process and how it should be handled and how this property might eventually be used in the future. I do feel that putting the conservation agenda in front of and separate from the housing agenda allows for the housing agenda to be subordinated and to be dealt with afterwards. It'd feel better to me, a lot of times when somebody brings in an application for a property, you say, well, we want to know what's going on with the whole property and not just a piece of it, so show us what's going on. What are your plans, Mr. Developer? Okay, so here we're dealing with a.
Can I interrupt you?
No.
Well, you've been going on for a while. I just want to interrupt you for a second. I just want to say, you got right to the point where you said the item that's on the agenda. It doesn't say that we have reached an agreement and we're going to sign a contract. And we're
I'm
going to
not
spend money.
saying that either, but it's not unreasonable to think that.
You said you've been waiting for an agenda item to try to find some resolution of what's been coming out of the executive sessions. What's on the agenda item says approve a letter of support to the VHCB for this property. NEAT owns this property. We don't own the property. You don't own the property. Sandy doesn't own the property. You have no control over what's going to happen to that property, period. All right?
The application's being submitted by the land trust, and the city is supporting the land trust.
Can I stop for a second?
Sure.
I want to remind both the council and the community that this is a city council meeting in public of discussion among themselves about action that they are going to take. Before they take action, they always welcome feedback and comment from the community. This is not a time for debate or name calling or uncivility. We have a lot on our agenda tonight, a lot that's going to require thoughtful public comment. Let's have the council hear from the community, not engage in debate, and then the council can make its decision. Also, we have others who are waiting to speak who would like to speak.
So I will wrap up. I came here without wanting to rant. I don't think I've ranted yet. I came in here.
I think you've made your point, Mike.
Okay. So,
Right.
it's not unreasonable for people to have some questions.
Well, I'm glad some are getting answered. Janet Bellavance.
Thank you. I'm a board member of the South Burlington Land Trust. And regarding tonight's request from the South Burlington Land Trust for a letter of support, I want to clarify that the landowner, Northeast Agricultural Trust, is not asking the city for any funds, nor has the city made any commitment or signed any agreement with NEAT. The South Burlington Land Trust, a local nonprofit, is applying for a conservation grant. The South Burlington Land Trust is not asking the city for any funds at this point, nor has the city made any commitment or signed any agreement with the South Burlington Land Trust. We are solely asking for a municipal letter of support from the council for our application to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. We hope you can support a local nonprofit organization whose mission is to preserve open space for the prosperity of our community, as we attempt to partner with like-minded statewide organization, Vermont Housing Conservation Board. The housing portion, phase 2 of the Longview project, will be completed once the conservation piece is done. Again, Northeast Agricultural Trust is not asking the city for any funds, nor has the city made any commitment or signed any agreement with NEAT regarding housing on this land. Thank you for the opportunity to stop any disinformation from spreading. Wild accusations and speculations will prevent good work from being done. I trust the council will support the dual goals of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Were there any more online? Any in the audience? Okay. So we have a letter before us to, I'm sorry. So we have a letter before us to, in support of the South Burlington Land Trust application for the conservation funding through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board in support of the Long property. Would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, excuse me.
6B.
Okay, yeah, I forgot. We have 6B.
So,
Can I ask Councillor Charlie to put his mic nearer his face?
of course, I will personally have a lot more to say next week at your celebration. For now, I will just say, as evidenced by tonight and every night, that I have the pleasure of serving with both of you on this council. The city will greatly, greatly miss your service, your leadership, your wisdom, your integrity, and it's just been an absolute pleasure. The city has prepared 2 resolutions to honor each of you. Shall we read them? Tim, would you like to read one and I'll read one?
Sure. Which one would you like to read first?
Please.
No, you choose.
I'll read Megan, and will you read Helen?
Sure.
Okay. Whereas Megan Emery will step down following her 14 years of service to the South Burlington City Council on March 5th, 2024. And whereas Megan was appointed to the South Burlington Charter Review Committee in 2007. And whereas Megan helped to reform the city's charter to include neighborhood civic forums. And whereas Megan was elected to the City Council in 2008, was appointed the vice chair in 2011 and served until 2012. And whereas Megan was reelected to the City Council in 2014 and again served as vice chair. And whereas Megan was South Burlington's representative on Channel 17's Board of Trustees between 2008 and 15 and served as its treasurer and president. And whereas Megan was a strong advocate for the new police station, the conservation of Leduc Farm, now Bread and Butter Farm, and the development of City Center, and whereas Megan was and is a fierce advocate for a noise exposure program to help residents of Chamberlain neighborhood affected by their proximity to the Burlington International Airport and was instrumental in the final negotiations that settled the airport appraisal disagreement. And whereas Megan's service was guided by her strong belief in smart growth, combined with natural resource protection, economic development, and diversity in housing to serve the needs of all households. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the City Council, do hereby honor Megan Emery for her years of dedicated service and offer our sincere thanks and appreciation in recognition of her leadership to be part of a government that is open, transparent, and accountable.
Thank you.
And new whereases. This is a city council resolution honoring Helen Reilly for her years of service. Whereas Helen Reilly will complete her fourth and final term on the South Burlington City Council on March 5th, 2024. And whereas Helen has served the people of Vermont in state and local government for 41 years. And whereas Helen served in the Vermont House of Representatives from 1983 to 1992. And whereas Helen served in the Vermont State Senate from 1993 to 2000. And again from 2016 to 2017, representing the Chittenden District. And whereas Helen has served the people of South Burlington as a city councilor for the past 12 years, and whereas Helen was first elected to the South Burlington City Council in 2012 and served as the city council vice chair until 2016, and whereas Helen was appointed city council chair in March 2016 and served until March 2024, and whereas Helen championed the development of City Center, including the construction of the library and City Hall, and whereas Helen was instrumental in creating the TIF district and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and whereas Helen guided the City Council in adopting policies and regulations that balance protection of the environment with necessary growth, therefore, be it resolved that we, the City Council, do hereby honor Helen Reilly in recognition of her 4 decades of dedicated service and offer sincere thanks and appreciation for giving the City of South Burlington the benefit of her time, wisdom, and good humor.
Yes.
Okay, on to real business.
Thank you.
Approve those. Oh, we have to approve them? Oh. I forgot about that.
Thank you. That's really
That was
touching.
really
It's really
lovely.
touching.
Thank you very much. So, do I hear a motion to approve the 2 resolutions just?
So
read?
moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 No. Okay, it was unanimous. You did vote. This wasn't middle school where you don't vote for yourself. You know what I mean? Okay. Moving on to item 7, which is a warning. I want to welcome everyone here tonight who's here for that the rental registry hearing. This is our second reading and public hearing. The ordinance has been before us many times. Not as many as the Long property, but almost. And we've had the opportunity to consider public comments, engage in our own discussions, and make revisions to the draft of the ordinance, drafts, plural, of the ordinance. We held a first public hearing at our meeting on January 16th, 2024. Tonight's hearing and the first public hearing were noticed in accordance with the city's charter. The purpose tonight is to hear from you. We won't be responding to individual comments during the hearing, except perhaps to ask a clarifying question to make sure we understand a commenter's point of view. We will take all that we've heard tonight during the hearing, together with any correspondence we have received, and have a council discussion and possible vote after the hearing has been closed. Procedurally, we'll take comments from folks who are in person in the room, and then we'll go remotely. If you want to speak here, please go up to the mic and make sure the little green dot is bright green. Our city manager will keep a running tab of those wishing to speak from the remote. Please let her know in the chat. And lastly, I'd like to ask everyone to please keep your comments brief and succinct. And I'll ask you to try not to repeat comments made by others. You can certainly say, I agree with the person who spoke 2 times before me. And if there's any time remaining at the end, if there's anyone who wants to speak a second time, I will entertain a second comment if it's new information. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to open the ordinance by title and enter our public hearing. So who would like to do that?
So I'll move that we open a public hearing on the second reading on a proposed residential rental registry ordinance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I make one suggestion, amend it to that motion that we, you move to read the ordinance by title?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes. We'll just,
So I'll amend that motion so that we read it by title.
Thank you.
Second.
I forgot to say that. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So are there any people in the audience wishing to make a comment? Please come forward. Make sure you state your name and that the green light is bright green.
Is green, and my name is Christy Moore. I guess I had a question. Can I ask?
I don't think it is on. It should be.
It says
like
green. It's green.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Now it is.
Speak
All
close.
right. Well,
Speak
maybe
close.
speak a little closer to the mic.
Okay. Christy Moore. I just wanted to get clarification because I've read through everything. Can I ask a question and then kind of go from there? So I am an owner-occupied short-term rental person, and I was just curious to get clarification on the inspections and what is required with regard to that when you're owner-occupied, because I couldn't really tell from when I was reading through it.
Okay. Can you answer that specifically?
Well, I'm going to be vague, to be honest. So owner occupied would require an inspection. It would basically going to have smoke detection, CO detection, egress windows, egress path. Those are the big things that would be required.
Okay, so where can I get a list of all that? When can I expect to have this inspection? Do we initiate? Are we contacted? Who pays for the inspection? And then I guess just to go on from there, since we are required to have the inspection, how come owner-occupied short-term rentals have stricter guidelines than having a roommate? Because I noticed in there that if you have a roommate, you don't have to have an inspection, which is essentially the same thing. Someone's living in your home where you're living as well. I know Burlington does not require owner-occupied to have this inspection, and that was a big thing that they went through for a long time. So my space is only occupied 70 to 80 days a year, not 365 days a year like a roommate situation is. I have insurance that protects me through my homeowner's policy as well as through the service I use, so I have double protection there. And when you have a roommate, you're not required to have any of that, where I am required to have both of those things. Every time someone is in my home as a guest, I am there as well. So I feel if it's safe for me, then it should be safe for those guests as well. A person with a roommate doesn't have to have the protections. They aren't always in the home. A roommate resides there 365 days a year, where I have that shorter amount of time. It seems like they'd be more liable, yet they don't need to have that inspection. So why should I need to have an inspection? I've made my home safe for me to live in, as well as any guest paying or not paying. And it would appear that I am less of a risk for this situation. And I don't want to have to get a roommate, but I can't afford to live in my home. I don't make a lot of money being a short-term rental person. This past year, I made a little over $11,000, and I've already accounted $8,000 of that to go into upgrades for my house for electrical things. So it's all going back into my house. I'm not getting rich off of this situation, but it enables me to be able to live in there. And if I go through the inspection, there are chances that there are things that I may not pass. I do have an older home, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have the short-term rental, because it is an interesting place. I walked in there and thought that this would be a great place to have a short-term rental, give people a place to stay when they come to South Burlington, and also be able to get the money from that to make the improvements on the home that are needed. But if I have to go through the inspection and it's just not even going to be worth it because I don't know that I can afford to make all the upgrades. I do have some of those things, but not everything. So that was just my comments and my concerns about that.
Thank you. Are there other comments in the audience? Looks like, oh, yes. Sandy.
Oh, wait. Sandy Dooley. I just wanted to say that the recommendation to have a rental registry was included in the report, The Path to Affordability, which the Affordable Housing, it was an ad hoc committee issued in 2013. So it is a real joy to see that you've reached this point, and the process has been fabulous. We've really been able to see what the initial proposal was, hear the feedback, see how it changed. I just want to encourage you to adopt it. It will be wonderful. I think a real achievement and a credit to all of you if that happens. Thank you.
Any other comments online?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Why don't we have Ryan and then.
Ryan Doyle speaking. In reading through this compared to the last change, the last version, rather, the changes I found were that the fees were moved outside of the ordinance, and there was a different schedule set up for short-term rental inspections. It removed the birthday information requirement, the notarization requirement, and changed the 2-day response time to a 10-day response time. Were there other changes made between this version and the last version?
I believe that accurately captures the changes. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Was this reviewed by the Vermont Tenants Association or the Vermont Landlord Association?
Okay, we're really here to hear from you and not have a debate.
These are questions.
So this is a public hearing. This is time
Yeah.
for the council to hear from the community about your opinions, and then they will have a conversation amongst themselves after the public hearing.
Well, then I'll assume that outside organizations that deal with the concerns of landlords and tenants have not been consulted on this. I think that they should. I'm not aware of any particular outreach on this to tenants. There wasn't any that I saw. It's unclear to me how this ordinance overlaps with the 2 bills that are in the State House right now regarding short-term rentals and long-term rentals. I notice when the taxes come out or when the new budget comes out, there's always this comparison about how it affects the average household, but not how it affects the average 2-bedroom apartment or 3-bedroom apartment. In my case, the fees associated with this are equivalent to an 8-point-something% tax increase to my landlord, which will be passed on to me as a renter. And I don't believe that there's been any effort by the city to try to work with other municipalities on this to save costs or contract with another municipality to save costs the way that municipalities do cooperate on things like water or police services or things of that nature. A rental unit has several definitions, including dwelling room, which leaves me unclear as to know if somebody rents out 2 rooms in their house on a short-term rental, if that requires 2 fees or not. That is unclear to me. Is staff able to answer a question about that?
We'll hear all the questions and then we'll respond.
So it also still has the double fee where because I rent, a fee goes to my landlord, and because I use a short-term rental website, I pay a fee additionally. In Burlington system, that does not occur. 3B doesn't require any information to be shared with renters, but a later section does require short-term rental hosts to share information with their guests. I wonder why my lease agreement isn't a legally valid document that I can submit in my application and why I have to get a second affidavit signed by my landlord. In paragraph or in section 3C1C23 or 2I3, it says other requirements as established by the city building inspector in terms of validating that you live there. And I wonder if that could be more specific. For example, we have certain things that we could use to declare that we are a resident in order to register to vote. And I think that state has a more comprehensive list there. 3C1D requires a $1 million insurance policy if you don't have one through your short-term rental site. And I wonder if that's simply a copy of Airbnb's number or if there's some data reason why that's the case. I do believe that there is an organization that will help you determine a reasonable insurance value locally. And that might make sense based on the size and value of the property. It maybe should be different. In 5F, it says that short-term rentals have to provide soap and linens. There are short-term rentals that are very bare bones and tell you to bring your own linens. They're meant to be affordable for folks who cannot simply afford to travel to nice places and in nice amenities. And so I wonder if that's a requirement we have for hotels or if the assumption is that hotels will provide that so they aren't required. In 5H, it talks about certain materials that a short-term rental host has to share with their guests. And I wonder if the city will actually make and provide those materials for them as a convenient handout. In 6E, it says renting any, but I think the word out is missing. Renting out any would kind of make more sense. If a business is renting, it assumes that they are the renter, just the way that sentence reads. When we think about the things that, in 3B, things that aren't shared with renters, right? There's a whole lot more you could do to provide value to renters in this. This provides an inspection. It gives you, the city, information, but it isn't giving the renter any more information. There's nothing saying that you have to tell the renter where emergency shutoffs are, or where emergency egresses are, or where the fire extinguisher is. There's actually quite a lot of things. We could make it a long list that are helpful for renters. So like information about the health officer, for example, how to contact city services or register to vote here. Everything else in 5G of this document, which applies only to short-term rentals and not to long-term rentals. Things like appliance manuals, it can take a really long time to figure out what the error code is on your water heater or your dehumidifier in your apartment at 3 a.m. Those things are complicated and they're not like cars where they advertise the models well. So having that information on hand to look up those things at inconvenient times would be really valuable to renters. Information about garbage, recycling, and compost, providing that information to renters would help them comply with recycling and compost much more easily, especially if they're moving from outside of Vermont, where both of those are much less common. It's actually a state law that landlords need to provide compost now, but there's a lot of leases that are old and not updated, and so a lot of landlords are unaware of that. Educating them about that would be very helpful. Other kinds of increased protections, like for example, against very high rate increases, or even ending the full winter street parking ban, as most places with rental units commonly don't have full winter parking bans. Burlington has the flashing lights. St. Albans has just when it snows over an inch at night, things like that. Burlington offers tenants more things and also charges less for their inspections. So Burlington has a city property database. This is information from Vermont Tenant Association under the CVOEO. I spoke with them. So Burlington City Property Database allows renters or anybody to search a public database that gives information about, you know, how many dings a landlord has had, for example. That can be really valuable in deciding if you're going to apply to a place or not, or if you want to negotiate a different price. It makes things a lot more transparent for tenants. Burlington also has a housing board of review, and let's say you don't get your safety deposit back, this is a first step you can go to very easily without going to court. There's also a tenant guidebook. It's pretty long, but on page 64 to 66, there's a move-in checklist, and Burlington City Ordinance requires landlords to do this with the tenant. And the person I spoke to at Vermont Tenants adds that they would love to see this to be a law statewide. So you can see from my perspective as a renter, this really, what you have in front of you doesn't do much for me, but at a lot of cost. And Burlington, who runs the same program for 60% of the cost per renter, provides a whole lot more. And I really think you guys should pass that more in tandem with an ordinance like this, instead of me hoping that the next council will be more responsive to the needs of our growing tenant population and provide us with more value, especially considering that we pay additional taxes as non-homeowners. You know, we pay the non-homestead rate. So for me, that's $550 more in taxes I pay every year because I don't own the property I live in. And that's besides the other things that affect older, smaller homes paying more per square foot than a lot of newer homes, or they are assessed at a higher rate per square foot than a lot of newer homes, which is shocking. And so I would like to see a lot more protection for tenants, especially as our city grows.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Marks, she's online. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. For the record, my name is Julie Marks. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance, which we call VSTRA. We are an association for Vermont's vacation rental community, and I am here today on behalf of our members, many of whom have an interest in the South Burlington rental market. These are homeowners who have chosen to share their homes with visitors and professional property managers who have built thriving local businesses here in Vermont. My personal experience managing vacation rentals began in 2018. I'm also a Burlington landlord or housing provider since around the same time period. And since I founded VSTRA in 2021, I have been professionally studying vacation rentals from local and national perspectives. And I serve on the Government Affairs Committee of the National Vacation Rental Management Association and have done so since 2022. I have seen a lot of short-term rental ordinances, but I have to tell you that I find the rental ordinance before you here going far beyond what we would consider reasonable regulation. Not only are many of the provisions laid out in this ordinance largely ambiguous, impractical, and seemingly unjust in many ways, but they are also unnecessarily onerous, arbitrary, and capricious. I've noticed several components of this ordinance that would put the city at high risk of legal challenges and lawsuits should this ordinance pass and be enforced. Given this late stage in your process here, I hope that it's no surprise to the council that federal courts in multiple districts across the US have ruled that prohibiting non-owner occupied homes from short-term renting unconstitutionally violates federal interstate commerce law and discriminates against different types of property owners. It's my understanding that when local laws discriminate against non-residents in the context of real estate rights and commerce, cities become vulnerable to constitutional attacks, that you as the city would be forced to prove to a court that you have no other available option. So your vote, if you make one tonight, would confirm that you are 100% confident that there is no other way to maintain the purpose statement of this ordinance, which is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the city and its residents. That the only option you have is to cause this financial harm at this time to these property owners and their families in order to protect the welfare of the city. And that you also have no other option than to rob future property owners of their freedoms and opportunities. Restricting short-term rentals in the name of public welfare or in the name of creating more affordable housing just fundamentally misunderstands the facts and misunderstands the activity of short-term renting itself. This ordinance, if passed, will discourage people from wanting to provide any type of housing in South Burlington. It will take away good paying jobs that local residents rely on, and it will likely cost the city tens of thousands in legal expenses that your taxpayers will pay for. This is not your only option. You have a chance to reverse course and take the public comment into consideration. I urge you to vote no. Vote no on the motion. Do not pass this ordinance without further review of its consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dana Harrington.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me a chance to weigh in here. One of the things about South Burlington is that we hold a special position in Vermont. I have long-term rentals and provide housing for people in South Burlington. And I do think that a long-term rental registration makes sense. I am weighing in today on the short-term rental scenario that's been laid out. South Burlington is friendly to family, friendly to residents, but also has been super amenable to business and growth. And so now we have this in front of us to which actually stems the ability for short-term rental landlords and area entrepreneurs, many who are South Burlington residents, doing short-term rentals out of their homes. It stems their ability to make that type of earning. So I wondered if we could think about, first of all, I do agree that we should be paying attention to how we align with legislation coming out of the state. That just makes common sense. But I'm wondering if there is a way we could do something instead of sunsetting to run a fair and effective registry. We could maybe perhaps put a limit. I don't know. I'm sure there's a best practices model that we could look at. I feel like $1,500 is high, seems arbitrary and capricious. So I'd love to know where that figure came from. And the 4-year limit for grandfathering makes no sense to me at all. As a property owner in South Burlington, curious about why landlords are being hit with such regulation when South Burlington has been so business friendly. Thank you. I would ask you to table this for now and maybe take in more information on best practices to go forward with the short-term rental part. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
This is Michael Sorokin. I don't know if can you hear me?
We can hear you. We just can't see
Can
you.
you see me? Can't see me.
No.
Camera.
Yes.
Michael, it looks like your camera is on, but maybe you have a piece of paper or something over your camera. It's all just showing up as black.
Or there's a shutter in front of your
Shutter?
camera?
No, there's nothing in front of my camera, and I don't see the light on. So, and I'm hitting the camera button, so on a screen. I don't know, it's the first time I've used this program, but Why don't I proceed without
Okay.
the video?
We all
and
know what
maybe
you
we'll-
look like, so,
We recognize your voice.
and we recognize your voice.
Yeah.
I'm chuckling, so that's what I look like now. So thank you. My name is Michael Sirotkin, and I live at 80 Bartlett Bay Road. And my family has successfully run a short-term rental right next door to my Bartlett Bay residence for almost a decade. We have run it very successfully. And when I say successfully, I don't mean financially successfully. All things considered, we just about break even. I also say successfully as we have never had a complaint in almost a decade. However, when I purchased the house next door, I was living alone, recently widowed, and my children had left for lives in more urban environments. I had and continue to have no family in Vermont. And with grandchildren on the horizon, I purchased the house next door with the hope that my family could easily visit at once, all at once, or in different combinations. And it has worked out fantastically. I now have 4 grandchildren under the age of 6, and they love coming to Vermont. Now, if it wasn't for the short-term rental income, I could never have made the numbers work. I also say successfully, as I said before, in almost a decade, we have no complaints from any neighbors, and we get along with all our neighbors very well. The thought of having this taken away from me in 4 years is disheartening, especially when we have followed the rules and do not think we are really part of the problem. We believe there are flexible alternatives that can stay true to the ordinance's purpose and intent. When dealing with property rights, I feel we need, from a legal perspective and otherwise, to be very careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Again, especially when alternatives exist. As many of you know, I was one of your state senators, and I chaired the Senate Housing and Economic Development Committee until my retirement 13 months ago. We actually addressed all the 3 issues you raised in this proposed ordinance. 1, the concept of a registry, 2, inspections, and 3, short-term rentals. And I can say that on all 3, while I'm very proud of my committee's work to get a handle on Vermont's rental situation, both short-term and long-term, this ordinance improves markedly on our statewide efforts. Again, the only concern I have is the taking away of property rights when other less absolute approaches might be equally effective. So I have 3 suggestions that I hope might remedy the 4-year sunset on non-owner occupied short-term rentals. The lightest suggestion is not even an adjustment to the ordinance, but something we did frequently in the legislature, asking for a report back prior to the 4-year sunset coming into effect on how, if at all non-owner occupied units are impacting their neighborhoods, and to see if the laudable comprehensive new regs work to correct the problems you see with some, but definitely not all existing non-occupied short-term rentals. Perhaps with that information and data in hand, you might choose to lift the sunset before it goes into effect. Second approach would be akin to the variance procedure that I saw in my time on the DRB. And that would let non-occupying homeowners who are about to lose their ability to do short-term rental be heard on extending the sunset for their individual unit if they can show a totally clean record, no neighborhood concerns, and they can show comparable oversight that the regs allow for owner-occupied short-term rental to continue. The classic example is perhaps my situation where I'm not in the house next door, but I'm right next door to the house next door. And I think I can provide the important oversight that having a responsible landlord being very close by provides. Finally, the third option is really just a flip of the first option, and that is to not impose a sunset at all at 4 years, but do a study and then get all the data you need as to how the regs, the substantive regs, are working to improve the situation in South Burlington and make a decision with all that information in hand and with a new ordinance in effect for several years as to whether you need to totally ban. I am a retired lawyer. I would say that I do share some of the concerns that were raised by one of the other witnesses as to whether you're engaging in taking of property rights away from somebody without a clear, cut cause to do so, and while you're allowing similarly situated owner-occupied homes to continue on. So I end this. I did provide more detailed written comments to all of you, but I wanted to keep this brief and focus on the 4-year sunset at this point and suggest some very easily drafted additions that could ameliorate that concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And we did all get your letter and appreciate you skinnying it down a bit. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment? I don't see any in the audience, and I don't see anyone. Okay. So,
I'm sorry, I had my hand raised. I don't know if it's too late.
oh, we didn't see the hand raised. Okay. No, it's not too late.
Hi. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I do agree with the regulation
Please, will
and
you
with,
state your name for the record?
sorry, Mike Cohen.
Thank you.
Yep. I agree with the former folks who came up and spoke about their concerns. I have similar concerns. I sent an email out this morning trying to just encourage a different thought process around, my concerns, which is not so much that I won't be able to renovate my basement, which I'm trying to do, and potentially short-term rental it, that is not a problem because I'm going to be living here and this is my home, but more so to understand what are the facts and figures behind the rental registration as you guys have put it together. I think it's very important for the sake of just clarity and transparency to understand the purpose and all the facts and figures that are going into these decisions to push this type of regulation out to the public, and to understand that the folks who did get burned by having poor hosts, bad hosts who did not take care of the property, who did not respect the community, and obviously created a lot of feedback for you guys to hear, which is unexcusable in my opinion. But just to understand that just because there were some bad activities, that doesn't mean that short-term rentals are bad, or that short-term rental owners or hosts are bad. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. I might never rent this out as a short-term rental. We got 3 little kids running around upstairs. I can't imagine anyone would want to stay below that. But if we ended up leaving or traveling or doing something super exciting with them, we just want that as an option. We have to sell our home because we found a way where we can travel and show our children a different world besides Vermont. We want to come back to Vermont because we love it here. But I can't afford to sell my property and lose the 3% interest I have on my mortgage and expect to come back to the same community. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I just thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. Are there any other takers? All right, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wait,
Oops.
Oh,
sorry, I had also just raised hand here online.
We don't see the
It
we
was-
don't see the raised hands, so I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So hi, I'm Ashley Truax. I wanted to second the thoughts from around the concern that the ordinance, as written, kind of takes some of the rights away from me as a property owner. And I shared this at the first reading in January when I was present. But the similar sentiments around, a temporary reassignment for a job or needing to live to my grandparents to support them for a period of time, but wanting to be able to return to the area and keep my home, having short-term rental as an option for our property. You know, we have done it before. We haven't had any complaints from neighbors, and when we've had job and you know, as I think Mike Cohen in his letter described, you know, the costs of living here, and certainly of having a young child, right? So daycare is about $20,000 a year, and those are just expensive to manage. But with short-term rental ability on a property, we were fortunate enough to be able to get early on, right, makes it possible to pay for those type of things. And so I would like to ask the team there, the council, to consider that the regulation as written does limit our rights and keeps us from being able to do things like that to make ends meet.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, we were about to vote. So unless there's anyone else, if anyone has their hand raised, we can't see it. So if you're
You can turn your camera on or indicate in the chat that you would like to speak.
okay, seeing no little faces come up, all those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Again.
So the public hearing is closed. So my thanks to everyone. And as I said at the start, we'll now conduct our own discussion of the ordinance and consider a possible vote to approve it. So what are anyone's thoughts?
I remain in favor of this rental registry as well as the ordinance. It was based on best practices. We are not discriminating against different zoning or different housing types. So I do not see that the federal court rulings would have anything to bear on this decision were we to pass this. We are still allowing short-term rentals, and we are ensuring a level of safety. And it is, I think, laudable that the State House is again coming around to this, but I do not hold out. I'm not going to hold my breath. It's been many, many years. And this came out of a case here in South Burlington, the rental registry, where the city really had no basis on which to act with regards to an absentee landowner, and it was a very, very serious situation. So I think that is important for the city to have the legal basis in which to protect the residents of the city. I think it's also reasonable, given the housing shortage, that we act to protect the stock, and that there not be complete houses that are turned over to year-round vacation rental. I am fully in support of the owner-occupied. I think that is a way for people to make ends meet, and I hear that. I'm sad to hear that is how people, that the only way they can afford to live here. That's clearly something that we still have to work on throughout this country. But I think it's reasonable, and I think that it's been well considered for a long time.
Other thoughts? Andrew.
Thank you, Helen. So maybe address some of the folks that spoke. First, Ryan, I think some of your suggestions are great. I think what I would really like to see happen, and maybe ask you to do if you want to do it, is work with the Affordable Housing Committee to come up with a set of improvements that we could all consider for a second round. I mean, I think the things you suggested are good, but they're not really core to, I think, for us to say, let's stop this process. Let's not get this these safety improvements on, and it's not just this rental registry while we consider your suggestions. But I think they're well worth consideration of a second round. So I would encourage you to do that. For former Senator Michael Sorokin, I hear what you're saying, and I guess what my perspective would be that we've talked a lot about what we do with existing short-term rentals. I think we came up with a plan that balanced a lot of the comments and testimony that we heard that's reasonable. I would say over the 4-year window, there always will be an opportunity for a future council to revisit that grandfathering. We can gather more facts. We can get the kind of reports you spoke about and determine during that 4-year window in consultation with our city attorney what options we have, what options may be reasonable, and perhaps modify and revise. So nothing's set in stone, right? These things are still malleable, and there's 4 years to do it. So I encourage you to kind of ensure that this issue is kept warm and that future councils do have the opportunity and the encouragement to look again and determine whether or not there should be a revision or modification on that score.
I might add that that could also happen if there happens to be legislation that requires us to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, often they say if you already have it, go with it, but other times,
Yeah.
like what we're doing, having to do with housing, the housing bill,
Yeah.
with our LDRs. So that's a possibility.
Just 2 more comments. So with respect to the woman who spoke, Chrissy, I personally see a difference between a roommate and a home share and a short-term rental or a longer-term rental of an excluded part of your home, a separate kind of walled-off part of your home where you're not sharing. A short-term renter is not going to have the same ability is not going to be invested as much in the home. Is the home safe, right? And I do think the city has an obligation to treat that as a public building and ensure that it's up to code and safe. A roommate is traveling around with you throughout the home, and I think has that same incentive as the homeowner. So I personally see those 2 things as different. A short-term rental just strikes me as also more of a business. It's more like a hotel, a business where you owe a heightened obligation, I think, to your clients and customers. That's kind of the way I see it. And it kind of also goes to some of the other comments. Why, if I move away for 6 months, can I short-term rent? Because it's a business, and you're in a residential neighborhood, and your neighbors just don't expect that to happen. And that's not what our zoning is. You can long-term rent. You can rent for 30 days or more, but you can't run a business. And I think that's what this is all about.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback from everybody, and we've had the same kind of similar feedback of several times. I'm not waiting for Montpelier. We've waited before. We could be waiting another 5-10 years. It might never ever happen at all. Burlington already has a registry. I will note that they charge $110 per unit versus $150 that we're proposing here. That's a small concern of mine, that maybe we're starting out too high on that per unit for the non-short-term rental, non-homeowner. But the point is that Burlington does inspect their units frequency about once every 5 years or so. And they have a fairly long laundry list of things they're looking for. Number 1 is hardwired interconnected smoke detectors that are photoelectric and also CO detectors in the proper locations that meet code, right? So those are requirements. And then also we have to be thinking about proper heat and also the examination of lead paint. So we do have many homes that were built before 1978, and that is a consideration if you're having kids in the house that they're with parents that are paying you through Airbnb or Vrbo. It's a business transaction. that's not really zoned for that in residential neighborhoods, especially for the non-homeowner, single family home STRs. So, and like Councilor Chalnick said, we are putting the stake in the ground and starting from zero, and there probably will be some changes to the ordinance as time goes on, because we are going to gather data, we are going to learn things, and we're probably going to have to make some adjustments along the way. So, my only concern is that I know that we have calculations about the cash flow for the registry and how 150 per unit fits into that versus 110. I just want to voice that concern. I don't know what to do about that right now, but I'm just saying that. So, thank you.
Okay. Larry, do you?
Thank you. So I think it's noteworthy that, for the most part, the public response has been on the short-term rental side of this ordinance, where, in fact, the long-term rental is really what we want to get going. I appreciate Andrew and others saying that the next council can take that up. I think they should. And as a gesture to that, I'm going to vote against this, so that there is a mark that shows that there is some concern that needs to be addressed going forward, assuming that it's going to pass. If it's not going to pass, I will, in fact,
you
vote.
got 3 people and
Right.
yeah. it
But
will
I think
pass.
that it's noteworthy that there's been enough discussion about this from people, some of which I don't agree with, some of which I do, that really needs some more work. And I think I might have mentioned that at one of my first meetings. Why was it combined? And I think it was just a decision at the time. And I think that it's well worth having a much more in-depth review of the short-term conditions that exist, because it doesn't affect. I mean, for those that it affects, it's noteworthy. But in the long term, in terms of the number of rental units that we're really talking about, and the amount of time it's taken to hear their concerns, I think it doesn't balance against the need for long-term rentals to have a registry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I appreciate that. I plan to support this as well. I think we've heard a lot of testimony, and I think this is pretty balanced. What we haven't heard tonight is really, I think, one of the effects with having the short-term registry is perhaps putting the kibosh on more and more houses being bought as Airbnbs, and really diminishing the amount of typically affordable housing in. I mean, I use that loosely because most housing doesn't appear to be affordable to too many people, but it really diminishes that capacity. And I think that's very real. While I can appreciate people wanting to know a whole lot of information about their short-term or their apartment rental, given the vacancy rate, I think when people find an apartment, if they can afford it, they grab it. They don't go and go down a big checklist. Maybe they should, but given the housing crisis, I don't think that really happens to the extent. So it should. So I think by having the requirements with a registry, particularly long term, but will, to the best of our ability, be guaranteeing that when you rent an apartment or a house, that it's safe. There's not going to be wiring problems or, egress problems or any number of things. So I think overall it's a good ordinance, and I certainly agree that we tinker with ordinances all the time. I mean, how many changes have we made to the noise ordinance? We're on it all the time. So these things are not, it's not like a charter change, so it's really hard to enact that. These are, I think as Andrew said, kind of malleable. Another council can change them, get information back, and I suspect with a registry, we'll have lots of information that we can ask for an analysis of and answer questions to better address some of the concerns that are still there after the enactment. Any other comments? So I would entertain a motion to approve the residential rental registry ordinance.
I'll move that the South Burlington City Council approve and pass the South Burlington Residential Registry Ordinance.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
So the vote is 4-1. It passes. But we're not done with this yet because we have two more things to do. On item 9 is the possible approval of resolution 2024-08, establishing the fee structure and inspection cycle for the residential rental registry. Steve, do you
Good.
want to?
Sure, I'll tee it up. As you all remember, the initial version of the ordinance had the fees in it, and per your direction, we pulled those out and put that into a resolution so that they could be changed in the future. And then the ordinance always talked about an inspection cycle, and that is codified in this resolution as well. So that is a cycle. We've been speaking about it, that if you have a clean inspection, you wouldn't see us again for 5 years. And on the kind of the toughest one, we'd be there every year. But that's with significant number of violations. So that is that's really the summary of that resolution.
I'll move to approve the resolution establishing registration fees and inspection cycles for the residential rental registry in the city of South Burlington.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to say that it's really great that we're using the resolution format to do this, because then it makes it easier to change it in the future without having to go through and read the whole ordinance by title.
Okay. Okay, if you're ready, all in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
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 So, any opposed? No. Okay. And then item 10, this is the possible approval of resolution 2024-09, which is establishing the residential rental registry special revenue fund.
Do we need anything?
And Martha needs
I can tee it up, but Martha, this is a technicality of basically having a special fund for the revenues that would go into, as well as the expenditures. And Martha can correct me if I said anything incorrect.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
One other thing about this fund will also capture the surcharge, the portion of the rental registry fee that will be utilized to assist property owners in retrofitting their homes to be in compliance with our codes and ordinances.
Okay. And how will those be administered? Do we know yet? That's something you'll develop?
We'll have to establish the rules around that.
Establish the rules. All right. Some other council can approve them. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
How will we be notified of cash flows in and out of this fund? Will that come with our, city council packets, or would it be an annual thing? I'm just curious.
Madam Chair, the reporting of it, I think, is not being determined yet, but it can be reported anytime the council would like to see them.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Well, and similarly to all other expenditures through enterprise funds or special revenue funds, it would still go through your warrant process.
Oh, okay.
Correct, Martha?
That's correct. All the payment will be coming through the warrant.
Thanks.
And then in the final audit, it would be identified.
That's
So you'd
correct.
have all those numbers.
Yep.
As one of the separate funds. Okay. You ready for this vote on the?
Oh, someone has to move.
Make a motion?
I move that we approve resolution 2024-09, establishing the residential rental registry special revenue fund.
In a second.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
that was
Thank you for
a long
Congratulations.
process.
Good job, gentlemen.
But I do like your suggestion that if Ryan really has some issues, I mean, I would think the Affordable Housing Committee may be an excellent venue to think about or to assist in pulling together even the materials that could be developed. Council priority. We'll see. Okay, item 11, consider approval of amendments to the collective bargaining, agreement. So, if there's no discussion, we can, just approve it, right? Yeah, we don't, yeah, go ahead.
So are we in agreement that we don't need to go into executive session?
We are in agreement,
Okay,
yes.
great. So I have a motion. I'm going to read it now.
Okay, thank you.
I move that the City Council approve the proposed amendments to the city's collective bargaining agreement with the South Burlington Career Firefighters Association as outlined in the January 25th, 2024 tentative agreement and authorize the city manager to execute the collective bargaining agreement with the South Burlington Career Firefighters Association for a renewed 3-year term of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2027, incorporating the amendments included therein.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Oh, yeah, because, is Miranda here? Yep. Oh, she is. Well, why don't we just take a little quick break, because, so 5 minutes, gang? Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so I would like to call back into order the South Burlington City Council meeting of February 20th, 2024. We are on item 12, what everyone's been waiting for, on the edge of their seat, I'm quite certain. And that being the FY23 audit conducted by RHR Smith. And we've Miranda McDonald as their person assigned to our city, and Martha Makehart, our finance director. So take it away.
Well, thank you. Good evening. It's probably one of the meetings that I'll be able to read and might be interested in when I read the minutes. Am I not on?
I think you're on. But
it says I'm on. Maybe I just need
well, so before Miranda talk, I just want to say that when we presented the end of the year financials in September, we estimated and audited fund balance surplus that we would have at over 2 million. The financials that she looked at and the other members of RHR Smith bring us to the same amount, which is great. And she will go over all the numbers that she looked at and how it is presented in the 122 pages.
Well, that is a testament to you, Martha.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yep.
That's pretty exciting when those numbers match, aren't they?
It's real good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I won't be presenting 122 pages.
Thank you.
Nope, just extracted a few pages to touch on, and then if you have any questions, we can go over that. So the first question we usually get is, what is the opinion of the audit? This can be found on page 1 in the letter. And it says in the second paragraph, in our opinion, the financial statements referenced above present fairly in all material respects. So that is what used to be a unmodified opinion. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Well, you're young. That was before your time. They have new language now. I get that.
It's true. As we go through the audit, I've extracted page 5, which is the management's discussion and analysis. So if you're not going to read the full 122 pages, I do suggest you at least read the management's discussion and analysis. It gives a good synopsis of what happened during the year financially. It also gives a comparison of current year to last year. It mentions debt and capital assets all within the MD&A. Which brings us to the next big question we get is, what is your fund balance? This can be found on statement C, page 18 in your audit. The first column is your general fund. And if we go down to the bottom, you have a fund balance of about $5.6 million. Of this 5.6, 319,000 is non-spendable because it's already been spent. It's in inventory and it's in your prepaid expenses. Prepaid such as insurance that you have to pay before July 1st, but it's really for the next year. There's 1.1 million of assigned fund balance. And this is city council designated and or management designated programs that you have. The list, it was provided by Martha in the letter, but it can also be found on page or in note 14 in the back of the audit, listing the total of the 1.1 million, which leaves a little over $4 million in unassigned fund balance for your general fund. This, when we did the math, you have a fund balance policy that your goal is to maintain around 2 months worth of operating expenses. And the $4 million is just under it, just by a hair's breadth. So I think that's a very good financial policy that y'all have in place, and you're able to maintain it. The other columns on this page include your TIF fund and your capital reserve fund. The fourth column, the other governmental funds, is a summary of all of your special revenue, capital project funds, and permanent funds, all your other governmental funds, which are in schedules in the back of the audit.
So our new rental registry fund will be in that column next year.
Yes,
right?
It'll be a special revenue fund in the schedule in the back of the audit. Unless you just significantly get a lot of money, and then it would be considered major and it would be on the front. And in this,
Well, it won't be major.
it won't be major. The next statement, E, is found on page 20 in the audit. This is going to be your activity for the year. For general fund, you have a little over $75 million in actual revenue collected. Most of that being your tax revenue. For your total expenditures of $71.8 million, which leaves you for operating revenues and expenses just under $3.3 million. There were some transfers in and transfers out, totaling a transfer out of 2.4. So your net change to fund balance for your general fund is about $818,000. Schedule, is it schedule? Statement A and Statement B, Schedule A and Schedule B in the back of the audit is your comparison to budget schedules with your revenue and your expenses. For your revenue, y'all had adopted about a $73 million budget. This does include the $44.5 million of the school. That's included in here. And you exceeded revenues by about $2.3 million, mainly due to grants and some fire department and ambulance charges that y'all had conservatively budgeted for FY23. For the expenditures, you did exceed budget by about $1.5 million. This is strictly due to the fund balance transfer that was voted on and approved to move from general fund into the capital projects fund. And so you can't just move fund balance from one fund to the next. You actually have to book it as an expense. So that is why you see expenditures exceeding the budget. To finish this out, as you can see, the TIF fund has a deficit fund balance for the end of the year. This is to be expected. And I know you're talking about other capital projects, and then the revenue does come in later years as the TIF is created to do. You can see about $4.4 million in your capital projects fund. And this does include the $1.6 million transfer in from operating fund, and then a combination of all the other funds for the fourth column. Statement G on page 22 of the audit is your proprietary fund, your enterprise funds. These funds are designed to make money and be self-sustaining. The rec programs at this point right now does have a deficit fund net position. In talking with Martha, there is discussions in place with leadership to address the deficit, and I will say this has been decreasing as the years have progressed. So they are making strides and decreasing that. The water department and then water pollution and stormwater utilities all have a positive net position, which most of that is tied up in your capital investments. But you still have a positive unrestricted net position, which is awesome. We don't actually always see that in these enterprise funds. So that gives you some working capital within those funds. And then statement H on page 23 shows the activities for the enterprise funds. As you can tell with the water funds as a whole, they all had net operating income, which is positive. The only fund, let's see, the water pollution fund, because of the debt interest expense, did create a deficit, a change in that position to be deficit by $50,000. So it did reduce the net position by just a little bit. The other two funds, water department and stormwater, did increase the net position. And with that, we also saw increases in the capital assets associated with those funds as well. All right. So I did receive a question related to one of the notes regarding the retirement benefit. And when we read it, it said that there was an unfunded liability for insurance, for health insurance related to retirees. And I wanted to address that to say the current liability for actual retirees is $643,000 or so. When we look at the sick bank fund, there's only about $345,000 in that fund balance. So when we say it's unfunded, we mean it's not fully covered, but it is partially covered. And at this point, there is budgeted on a yearly basis to continue to contribute to that fund, but it currently remains not fully funded.
Okay, so I think you've answered my question. So the number in the note, the 3.6 million, is net of the amount in the sick bank account? Because you say it's unfunded, and then you say 3.6, but there is, roughly 350,000 in the account. And so is that a net number?
It's not, but what I'll do is, as I've talked with Martha, and what we're going to do is revise the note to say it's partially funded.
Partially funded.
Yeah.
And reference the sick bank account.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep. Are there any other questions? I have 2 letters to get to, but are there any other questions related to the audit? Okay. Normally every year we issue what's called a management letter. And I will say in the past, there have been comments associated with that. And it's just, as we're doing the audit, if we come across something that maybe we think could be improved, we issue a management letter comment. It's usually pertaining to internal controls, policies and procedures, and strengthening the business office. I will say that this year I did not have any comments from Martha. I know we had a comment last year. She addressed it, and this year we didn't find anything. So I think is awesome. Congratulations.
Yay.
And the last letter we issue is referenced as a SAS 114. The biggest thing out of this letter is this middle thing where it says we encountered no significant difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. So in that, I would like to thank Martha and Celine for making this audit pretty smooth.
Nice.
Yeah.
That would be it.
can I ask a question or two?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You're
Yep, I'm done.
So,
the signing stuff. I apologize.
so I don't know how a full audit process works, but does it include some sampling of receipts and expenditures and making sure that they were signed off and things like
Yes.
that?
Yes, we do a test of controls is what we're testing because there are some policies and procedures that are written that Martha and the business office follow. And so we sample expenditures, cash receipts, credit cards, journal entries, review them to make sure all what's written in the policy and procedures are followed.
And how do you select those? Are they randomly picked, or do you ask for the last month, or?
I believe the correct word is haphazardly. It truly is just, sometimes depending on the auditor, it depends on how I feel or if another person is helping me. So it could be, yep, I want to see the first 30 journal entries for this month or, 10 journal entries from this month. But it could also be, I'm going to review a bank statement and say, I want to see this check or I want to see this check. It kind of, we look through bank statements, we look through their general ledger, detailed general ledger, and we say, you know what, this kind of looks funny to me. I want to see the backup documentation for this. It's not always like that. And so it really just depends on who's actually doing the test work.
Do you get down into like pay stubs at all? Do you look at that?
Sometimes. We do more of an analysis, a substantive approach to payroll because we understand that it's a significant part of a city's budget. Normally it's like 80% of a budget. So we do some substantive testing that says, okay, well, the ratio, what it was last year at 60 or 80%. And then if we do the ratio again this year and it's in line with where it was last year, depending on, conversations, depending on, I read all the city council minutes to see what kind of discussions there have been, depending on, I talk with Jesse, I talk with Martha, have those conversations to determine maybe there's something that we need to look into further than just the substantive testing. And if there is, then we get down to, yep, we haphazardly pick employees, try to get at least one from each employee group, review pay stubs, review all that detail associated with it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So how many ooh, this looks a little weird did you have?
Well, I can say that anything that might have looked weird wasn't had all the backup and signatures, otherwise we would have made a comment on it. Sometimes it could be a vendor. Sometimes it could be, if I see Martha's name and it's for $1,000, that, I might want to look at that to see, does it look funny? Or if I recognized, a council person's name and it's running through accounts payable when it should be running through payroll. We also look, I'm trying to think, I have school district experience and, something funny might be they bought a dog bed, and it's like, well, really? But the kindergarten, no, they bought the padding for the ground so the kids could sit on it because it had the padding and the carpet. I'm like, okay, I can see that. And it's a legitimate purchase. But that's some of the, funny stuff that we kind of see and look for.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Do we have to adopt? No, we just have to. Oh, we have to accept it. So do we vote to accept? I'm trying to remember. I should know by now, huh?
May as well.
Okay, so I move that we accept the FY23 audit.
Second.
Any further discussion? Just do it again next year. All in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miranda. Excellent job, Martha. Thank you.
All right, so now we have the TIF bond documents. Man, were there a lot of these. And on and on. Welcome, Mrs. Tiff. Or Madam Tiff, I guess.
Good evening. For the record, Alana Blanchard, Community Development Director. And what you have before you are the TIF bond documents. We applied in the late winter to the Vermont Bond Bank following a council meeting and council approval for the Vermont Bond Bank to issue the last piece of TIF district debt. So this is our last opportunity to issue debt that would be financed with TIF district financing. And this is the last amount that the voters have authorized. It's for 18,606,000 and I think it's 500 and maybe 35, I'm not sure. But since we met with you, Martha and I went through various bond schedules and scenarios. So what was presented in the initial packet was a very conservative number. So that had interest over 4%. It had level payments, so similar to a house mortgage, meaning that the principal was paid down more slowly than traditionally with the bond. And so what we settled on with the bond bank, given a variety of schedules that they gave us, so at the same time, so we could look at the differences in interest, as well as how the payments would affect the cash flow over time, was a 4-year delayed principal with 10 principal payments that are level. So that gives us a lower interest rate than we would have in a different structure, but it also allows the city to push the initial principal payments, which are 1/10 of 18 million essentially, out for a few years in order to assess the cash flow before we need to start paying those.
So what's the year when all of the bonds are paid off? I want to know if I'm going to be alive.
I really hope you will.
Tell me my time. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I might be alive.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
So it's it would be FY 2038.
Oh, okay.
So not too far out.
I could do that. Yeah. Well, if I was going to be 110, it was unlikely.
But yeah. So essentially, what you have before you is the agreement, and so the resolution that is in your packet would enable the bond bank to go out and issue those bonds, and it also allows the agreement to be executed, the loan agreement to be executed with the bond bank.
Okay, that's a lot of work.
Our bond counsel put most of that together. So.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are there questions?
So this includes the bridge, Williston Road, the extension of Garden Street. What was the fourth thing again?
City Center Park.
The park.
The park, the
Right,
bridge thing.
bridge. Okay.
The second bridge.
The second bridge, yeah.
Right.
So when you say the extension of Garden Street, is that over on the Williston Road side?
Yeah.
Oh, that reconfiguring that intersection?
Right, going across Williston Road.
Okay.
And we're still in the process of looking for outside funding for the bridge.
For the bridge. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the same amount that was in the TIF district plan from before.
Okay.
We haven't changed that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will move, I guess.
Is there a special motion for this? I didn't see one.
Yes, I will move to approve the TIF bond documents for the final TIF debt as previously approved by the voters.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good job. Yeah.
Well, to all of you too.
All right, item 14, discussion of a growth management plan and provide direction to staff.
So I'll kick this off as Paul comes down. Come down. So you requested at your last meeting that we add a conversation of potential growth management plan to our agenda this evening. Paul and I spent some time putting together this fairly quick summary, calling your attention to the relevant goals that are currently in our newly adopted City Plan 2024 and related discussions that outline both goals and actions related to the growth we're intending to see. A link to the Planning for Vibrancy report that the team recently did for the community. I mentioned earlier the statewide efforts to plan for housing, forest blocks, and other state and local investments. So I think the key questions I think this council or future council need to consider as we contemplate doing a growth management plan is really what is the goal of such a plan and how is that different from the direction that's within the city plan? What are the specific constraints the council and the community are concerned with that will inform the orientation to what data we collect, what professionals we bring to the table. Guidance on, are you looking to establish tools to manage growth that keep up with our current rate of investment in public infrastructure and services? Are you looking to establish tools to incentivize a certain type of growth in order to meet our workforce and community good needs and our community vision? For example, realizing the success of the TIF district, meeting our service provider needs at partner institutions. So those are some key questions that we brainstormed. And then we made some very broad recommendations about potential governance structure that could help guide such a plan. We're recommending the creation of a task force. The Planning Commission has a huge work plan, and an effort like this, I think, is broader than just Planning Commission, but really should involve lots of key partners, all the committees, the council, school board, etc. And a task force might be well suited to kick that off. Likely this will need additional resources to bring in the right minds, thinkers, economists, demographers, get data sources, etc. And then we provided a set of examples of how other communities have addressed growth management plans. Just it always helps me to look at examples. So as I was researching those, thought we would throw those in there. So that's the memo we provided. Paul, is there a key point you'd like me to underline?
No, I think you hit all of it. Thank you.
So happy to take direction tonight or have you all think about this, have this be part of a future policies and strategies conversation. We are here to receive guidance.
I just have a question in terms of the resources that you might need to really pull together some of the consultants that you sort of mentioned, and I'm just wondering, I won't be part of that conversation, but we still have some ARPA money available, and I'm sort of like putting it out there that this, since to me this is not a whole lot different than paying for a parks plan, right? That might be a funding source, because I think personally, I think this is a really important thing to do, and we need it to be robust and really give us information that can help both the Planning Commission and the council and other committees and city government to make certain decisions and kind of have some idea that we might not have unintended consequences, but we would be planning and it would work out. It won't always, but so I'll just put that out there as something for the future council to consider.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm struck looking at the PowerPoint presentation is that, is it this one I'm looking again? That, I don't know if, yes. the modeling between city housing data and school enrollment data. So what I see is that the different, I think we've been diversifying our housing stock and have been attracting different types of families to it. And I don't know if that is the sole tool. When I think about the concerns of the public, that the city and school district work together in order to plan, I think that the school population is one of those areas, and I don't quite know how to control that. I mean, it is difficult, other than making sure that we have, the diverse housing stock where it's not all for, the family of five, that there is, for people who are just moving in and getting a career, they're single, they've just, gotten their first job, to the retired person, that there are options in the city, that I consider, and I've said it before, to be really beneficial in terms of evening out, the demands on our municipal services and the revenues that we can collect, right? That families are they have a high demand on our services, and so we want the families, but we need to make sure that we have our services in place, including schools, so that we can provide for them what we need to provide for them, what they expect us to provide for them. I don't know how to control that other than diversifying the housing stock. But I know the town of Williston has a growth management plan. I would just be very wary, having talked with two planning commissioners from the town of Williston, that numbers may not lead to the best outcome, in terms of design and best use of space and all these things. So that's a balance, for people to consider. Is it truly numbers that we need to control, or are we finding solutions, where we accept that we don't have total control, but where we attract a diverse population, which is, I think, what South Burlington has been doing. And I heard, very good things about what South Burlington is doing. But clearly, we have growing pains in our school district.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you. I think a part of what I read in Jesse's memo was the idea that we probably don't need a growth management plan, since we have all these other activities going on. But that wasn't actually the accurate. That was my first read. My second read is, it seems to me that the tension in our city right now is between conservation and development, and I feel that from a housing point of view, and not just business, but housing development and open space. And I think this would be a great spot to have community input in both of those ideas. Because a growth management plan, any kind of growth is also going to mean pressure on open space. And I think from a community discussion point of view, and I like the idea of, it needs to be done in a professional way, but there should be a great deal of public input in it, in terms of expectations. Mm-hmm. So I see that as an avenue for that discussion to continue. And I think we saw some of that tension earlier tonight between the expectation of a parcel that can be developed and what can happen there versus the conservation side of that parcel. So beyond needing to be financed and having another group of folks at the table here soon, without burdening them of a task, I think it's a good idea to move forward.
Well, I'll throw in 2 cents. So I seem to think that the city plan is like a growth management plan already. I mean, it establishes, I mean, you take that in conjunction with the LDRs and it provides rules about how high you can build, where you can build, where you can't build, right? And we've laid out where we don't want to build. And the last set of LDR changes 2 years ago spelled out pretty severely, what our conservation objectives are, especially in the southeast quadrant. So, but I think the question that was raised, it has more to do maybe with schools, right? And like enrollment numbers, and then the need for possible construction. Like the Zems are right over there, and they're a very good example of a bolus of kids going through the elementaries that demanded more space. That I don't know if it was anticipated or not, right? So then the question is, how do you manage that? Well, you manage it by predicting it accurately and then taking steps in advance to provide that resource to provide that space for those kids when they come along. But you're not always right, and so, I mean, Vermont isn't really growing, but Chittenden County is growing and South Burlington is growing. And we're attracting more people in because of the diverse housing stock, right? So that is going to add pressure to the schools. So maybe the question's more about how do we manage that? How do we manage our additional housing and the pressure it puts on population in the schools, right? Without sending our property taxes through the roof, which is probably going to happen anyway, unless something happens in Montpelier, next month or this month, whatever. You know what I mean? So,
But it's more than the school costs as well. I mean, there's services more roads and, I mean,
sure,
school is probably the most expensive because what did Andrew work out? $28,000 or $24,000 a kid. I mean, if you take the whole budget and just divide it, so you add another 100 kids, and you're talking some big money. But we're also talking about.
But if you say Edgewood is done, right, and the Hill Farm's probably going to get done, right, and you look at whatever other big developments that are going to be done, the rest of it's all, rehabilitation or recycling of existing real estate into more housing, right? So those roads are already there. And I hear your argument, right?
I understand that.
But the question is how much, marginal increase in those other demands will there be? If there's more people, there's going to be more demands on fire and police.
Right.
I mean, I guess. I mean, retail takes a fair block of their time, and and then the opioid problem takes a big block of fire, time. So
more people maybe increases that number.
So growth management is how do you manage the service demand increases, right? And that includes schools. So
right. I just think, and I would agree, the biggest chunk is schools.
So I'd love to see somebody else's plans first before we did anything, and maybe we just look at them collectively or somehow.
Well, there's a whole list of them.
Yeah, but I mean, and how have they been used, and have they been used effectively? I mean, that's.
Okay. Yes, Andrew.
So I started thinking about this when we did the school tour a few months ago. And each one of the principals in the elementary school and the middle school talked about unanticipated student growth and how they were squeezed here and squeezed there and didn't have rooms and they didn't expect it and they can't keep up. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's really interesting. And it kind of dovetails with some of the discussions around the school construction budget that went down. And then I look at the really great presentation and I see that in the past 2 years, we've built like close to 900 homes and permitted and another close to 700. So that's 1,600 homes. That's like a 15% increase in our housing stock. And I'm just saying, wow, these things just seem like we need to get a better handle on it because we're not growing at 1.5%. We grow at 15%, if I have that right. So that was kind of my perspective, that we just should maybe understand this a bit better and get a better handle on, are we growing in a way that we can anticipate, plan for, and project in a good, controlled, disciplined way. The other part of this for me is like the vision of what South Burlington wants to be in 10, 20 years. Do we want to be an urban area where, you know, everything grows to 5 stories everywhere it can, and you know there's 600 new homes added every year, and there's traffic, and you know, or do we want to like retain a little bit of our charm? And that's also to me plays into this. I don't know it's so much an open space versus development, because I think the LDRs do a pretty good job about delineating the open space at this point, but it's just more about like at some point are we going to have so many people that this place loses what we all love about it? And maybe not, but it's something we should think about. You know, what our carrying capacity is to support the quality of life that we all love. So that's kind of my perspective on this, why I think we should give it a little bit of thought. I'm not saying we should have a plan or we shouldn't have a plan, but it just seems to me it's worth considering and thinking about. In terms of budgeting, I would not want to budget a lot for this right now. I guess personally, I'd love to implement the climate action plan. We haven't done anything on thermal, and like I think we should start that and prioritize our our housing stock. What we're going to do about that. I just think like that's probably in my mind a higher priority, but I don't want to lose this conversation. It makes sense to think about it and see what we can do with a task force, maybe of community members, people from different committees, you know, citizens, volunteers looking at other plans, pulling information together to figure out, okay, is this something we want to do? Do we need to hire a consultant? I'm not there yet to spend money on it. I just think it's something we need to think about and consider.
Okay. Other thoughts? I just want to. There was a great op-ed in VT Digger written by Paul Bierman, a UVM professor, talking about Burlington's infill projects, and I would really encourage you all to look it up. And what he said, and I've heard it said in the city, is to really focus on where we have impervious surface. And so when we look at the neighborhoods and infill, I think we just, in terms of carrying capacity, I often think about that as how much, just green space do we need in each neighborhood so that we're not causing flooding of basements, right? We're not creating so much runoff that the pollution in the lake increases. That was his point specifically. Pollution in the lake increases dramatically. So that's something that I would prefer. The diversification of housing. We have a lot of single family homes here. Our schools at the present time we don't have a plan to have, more school buildings. So looking at our city center, really prioritizing, I think our plan does do that. It prioritizes development of our impervious surfaces and looking specifically, at the U-Mall property, for instance, and that whole city center area. That makes a lot of sense. Or along Route 7, that makes a lot of sense. We have big parking lots that should be the priority for where that housing goes in. And if it can be apartments where we can have these, new professionals and the service workers and everything else that we need to make our businesses run and our residents have the amenities that they need. We need housing for those people, and it just looking at bringing in that younger population. It's what keeps the state operating. It's what keeps our city operating as well. And I do agree with you, Tim, that I think that our the city plan that we just passed, that it has been the growth management plan of South Burlington traditionally. So I do agree with that.
Some of the developments that have caused extra traffic on roads end up triggering the need for a traffic light, right? So, developer A comes in, doesn't meet the threshold. B, when C gets in there, they go, oh, now we have this many trip ends, and now we have to have the traffic light, right? And maybe this already exists, but maybe we need that kind of a detection on housing so that when developer C comes in, the impact fees for education quadruple or something like that, right? In other words, if you're going to trip that wire where you're going to have to buy 10 more ZEMs or whatever it is for the school to be able to contain that capacity, which you can pretty much predict is going to happen because of this type of housing, then you really need to turn a big switch on to extract the money to pay for that thing, right? Which may in fact then reduce the number of units that get built on that property, right? That may be its own growth management where you say the schools can't afford to put these kids through because we don't have enough teachers, enough space. So you're going to have to pay the cost to add an addition to the school, in which case they go, well, that's going to affect our decision on how many units to build, right? Which it affects a lot of things, right?
Sure.
Because I think the two interlock really closely and they need to be looked at before we just, and this is the dilemma. The only way to change the vacancy rate on apartments, right, is to build a lot of apartments, which Germany finally figured out, right, is just permit the hell out of it and build as many apartments. And then the vacancy rate starts to go up, right? And then landlords go, oh, I've got to rent these things, right? And then they start lowering rents. I mean, that's the economic theory, right?
Right.
But the problem is that I think probably if we build a whole lot, they'll just all get filled up, right?
Well,
and they'll bring
drive
people.
around Chittenden County.
Huh?
Or just
Yeah.
into Williston.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep wondering, so how many units? I mean, they say we'd like, what, 20,000? Is that the number, Paul? That,
CCRPC?
CCRPC says, is that what we need for Chittenden County? Is
Uh,
it 20 or is that the state?
I think that's a number that's been thrown around. The state is currently under Act 47 developing a 2030 and 2050 target to be assigned to each region. So there isn't, I know there's been a number tossed around, but I'm not sure that's following the formal methodology that has been sort of assigned in Act 47. So I can't speak to
But
that number more
I
specifically.
just am astounded at how much housing has been built. I drove through Winooski the other day. I went, oh, there's 2 new apartment buildings that I hadn't noticed before. And you drive into Williston and you get lost trying to find LL Bean, and it's, I don't know how many units they've built. We've built a lot. Cambion Rise in Burlington is going to have another 500, and then you have the downtown. So part of me is like, all right, we have these goals, but are we meeting the housing needs for Vermont, or are we meeting the housing needs for New England or California? And so where does it sort of begin and end? Affordable, I think, is our people, because they have lists with, the housing conservation, so they're not sort of rummaging around New York City to see who needs an affordable apartment, and shipping it up here. At least Texas isn't yet. But the other housing, like behind my house, I don't know who those people are.
I think.
But see, that's why I think
Yes,
you
I'm sorry.
can't answer look at it from that lens. That's why I really think we need to look at this from the lens of what do we want to be? What's our vision for the town? Do we want a traffic light at every corner 20 years from now with traffic at every corner? Do we want apartment buildings lines? Like, is that what we want? Or do we want to keep some of our charm? And once we figure out and or agree on what we want to be, then we could maybe enact some rules to try and get us there. And whoever moves in, right? That's the way I would look at it. Like, first set the vision out.
Jesse, you want to say something?
So I have a whole lot of thoughts on this, and I think I agree with you. We are not at all ready yet to allocate money. We have no idea what we'd be allocating money for. Having said that, to answer the questions you are asking are, sociology PhD, urban planning PhD questions. What is the utopic city we're trying to build, and how do we incentivize getting there? Do we want a diverse population across the income stream, or do we want affordable housing and housing for the richest who can afford to enter? Because we are an attractive place to live. We are going to be an attractive place to live for decades, for centuries. And how do we embrace that and manage that? I guess I would just also add that we can talk about who we want to be and where we've come in the data. And I think, to me, that's where I think we have to start. I think there's another side of that conversation, though, that we're going to need to overlay at some point, which is, what are the services we need to operate that utopic community? And we are seeing those eliminated because we don't have workforce. So if we want to have, Act One bridge program just totally closed because they couldn't maintain a workforce, which means all of our neighbors who are in crisis are going to go sit in the emergency room as opposed to go to a therapeutic setting. That is a value we are placing on lack of workforce housing. What are the policies that we have around, and this is way above my pay grade, but around other school policy issues? Are we okay operating 5 school buildings? Are we okay with class sizes of a certain size? Is that a way that we counteract some of the cost experience? I just want to share this for a minute because I think that this is where we really need to, I think we need to start. So the team, not me, the team put together this really interesting spreadsheet. This is in the population, I think, or in the presentation. I think, Megan, this is the one you were talking about. In this is where we are right now, right? In 2024, 25, we're right around this point in this graph. So to Andrew's point, we've added all of these new homes. The last big increase in school enrollment was here in 2016 to 18.
Right.
Then we added pre-K, so that went up. That was a policy change. I think we all agree that kids going to pre-K is a great idea.
Jesse, what's
So
the green bar?
The light blue bar is the population. So yellow is the number of dwellings, number of homes.
Population.
The blue is the population in South Burlington. The dark blue is the population per the McGibbon.
Oh, that's blue. For some reason, my eyes are seeing green. Okay.
Yeah, the middle one.
The middle one.
If you look at it at
Okay.
an angle, it is green. Your screen
Right.
looks green,
So
mine looks blue.
the light blue and the dark blue are. Sorry, finish.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
The light blue and the dark blue are the light blue is what the planning and zoning department is estimating based on what we have. The dark blue is what McKibbin Demographics has come up with.
Which are the school demographer.
Well, the school demographer, not for the school.
This is showing that the school demographer may not be
No.
into account.
No. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. All I'm saying is that here are all those new homes coming online, as you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
The population is going up in accordance, not necessarily at the same rate. And then this is the rate of change we've actually seen in the schools in the last couple of years. Now, that could be a total anomaly that's leveling off. We don't really know what happened here for the spike in these couple of years, but it seems to have been leveling off. So I think we need to dive into Megan's point about why is this happening? If we assume that this data is accurate, that our team has put together and the school demographer has put together, we did see a big jump in the school population based on something and pre-K, but we haven't seen it in the last couple of years. So does that mean we just need to double down on school planning and address the increase we previously saw that we haven't planned for? Or are we really going to continue to see this, and what is driving that, and how do we manage that? If that's really our concern, our initial concern.
Just so I can be clear, are we, the city, projecting a different population growth than the school demographer, as evidenced by the light blue versus dark blue bars?
So I'm going to be careful in my word choices. The demographer is a professional demographer. They are looking at a lot of different factors that influence population, in migration, out migration, births, deaths, all sorts of things. So I'm not, I can't qualify that. In what we put together from the city end, we looked at what we are anticipating in future housing, and then we called out a approximate stable people per household from what we have going forward. And so there are some differences in there. I think we'd need to unpack what are some of the assumptions that are different, but it felt fair to show a couple of different versions of this for you all. The pre-K and the K to 12 numbers are done based on the McKibben demographics. So it is conceivable that if the line falls somewhere between the blue and the greenish blue, that there could be a relationship to those two lines also. But I did not take a course in demography, so
Fair enough.
I want to be mindful of that. But it shows a
maybe
range.
indicates that there should be some more discussion so that those two bars maybe come closer. I don't know. Or maybe the demographer needs to have a discussion with some city staff, maybe, or maybe not. The demographer's not anticipating certain trends. I don't know.
Well, what's interesting is the light blue and the dark blue for the known years are right on.
Yeah.
So it's looking forward. It's the forecasting that's different.
Well, of course it's going to be exact.
Well, McKibben's numbers, though, were not looking back. McKibben's numbers were forecast, right? Or no?
I'm just saying for the past, it has to be the same, right?
Well,
I think what I did
the
with
way
the
I understood
McKibben
is-
reports is there've been every 2 years McKibben reports for the last decade or so.
Yeah.
And so whenever they have done the most recent one, they have trued up any numbers from
They've
the
trued
past.
up,
And so
okay.
I collected
I
their
see.
prior ones and trued up. So that doesn't
Okay.
surprise me that they would match.
Okay, all right. I didn't know that it was trued up. I thought that was all of his forecasts.
And my point was less about these out years, which you're absolutely right, Andrew. We need to get these figuring out how we're using the same data source. My point was more the recent past. What happened here with this spike in the rate increase? And as the rate increase has leveled off, is that our policy working to diversify our housing stock? Is it something else? Understanding that, I think, may answer some of these questions about how do we plan for what's coming up if our value is to keep our schools around the same size, or if our value is to know how our school population is going to change so the school can appropriately plan for their capital needs. So I was just offering this as maybe this is a starting point for a task force conversation, is to unpack that 8-year span.
The Great Recession,
8.
Started to pick up in 2013 for a while.
Yeah. There's lots of interesting
Something
potential.
happened and started in 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Something came online. I can't think of it what it is right
Well, that's when my daughter started kindergarten. She brought all her friends.
I mean, a challenge here is that there's so many variables that could go into this. So using just one, for instance, when John Slason came to you a little over a year ago about the school impact fee, one of the things that he'd identified was that in South Burlington, we have a higher than the state or national averages of students who are in one-bedroom units. And so I don't know if you recall that detail, but the impact fee that would be normally charged to a one-bedroom if you use just national metrics is minuscule because there are no kids in it, but there are the data shows that there are more here. So it may not even necessarily be about the type of housing or what was constructed or when things were constructed, but it may be about the cost of housing and where people are choosing to, live in different environments than they might have chosen to live in before. So there's just so many different variables here that would be worthy of unpacking to the extent that we can.
Yeah, our housing costs are something.
We need an audit.
An audit of.
We need an audit.
I think
like
she left.
Like a population quality audit, right? That says that, you just take samples like these people moved in. Why? Because X and Y. They have 2 kids. Where'd they come from?
Well, the Affordable Housing Committee would like us to do a housing audit.
I mean, there's. Anyway.
They would like us to look at what the needs are. So, I mean, I'll just put that out there to the two guys who are going to be there in a month.
Yeah. The two
So-
guys, right?
So this is a helpful conversation. I'm not hearing a whole lot of immediate direction to staff, but I think we'll keep it on the medium burner and see what the new council prioritizes in the next month or two.
Predict the future for us. That's all.
No problem.
Well, but sometimes when you campaign, you hear things, so you get a sense of the community that, you know.
We
that-
also have 3 council candidates on GoToMeeting right now, listening to
Right.
this conversation.
So,
Bringing
you know,
us back
they
good
will
ideas.
bring additional perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that will help that discussion. But I think it's an important one, and I would hope it doesn't die. All right, have we been successful?
Ellen, a
about
real
giving you-
zinger for your last meeting.
Pardon me? Pardon?
A real zinger for your last meeting.
No. Okay, item 15, the policy priorities and strategies, report number 2.
So annually, we bring this to
Yeah.
you right around this time of year as our second installment of this annual report. I'm not going to walk through this. This is in the purple column, in the far right column, in the red text, you can see this iteration's updates. We bring it to you now both to celebrate the successes of the outgoing counselors, but also as an orientation tool for the incoming counselors. And obviously for you all to have a snippet of where we are with each of these priorities. So I'm happy to answer any questions about these. But I won't walk through them. I guess I'll stop there.
Well, I read through them, and my reaction is you've been really busy, and we've made some real progress in a lot of areas. And then there's also those kind of disturbing realities that say, you know, we couldn't get to it. You know,
Yep. And we try and be really upfront about that.
not yet started, or just the resources aren't there. But
And yes, that is true. And I would also just state the obvious, you know, these are the activities we take to further the community's vision. They don't take into consideration the core government we're providing on a day-to-day service. Nowhere in here does it say we're going to respond to calls for service or run elections, but obviously we're doing all of that too.
Yeah.
Is there any follow-up on the community gardens close to the airport that the airport would be putting on their land?
I don't know.
Paul Conn, Director of Planning and Zoning. Just what I can say, just briefly, is that at right around the start of the new year, I had met with the airport director to discuss a variety of things, and one of them was their general schedule and thinking for what they call their overall landscape plan, which includes the trail and different components and potential funding sources and partnerships associated with it. We are due for a follow-up pretty soon on that, but they are what they reported was, at least in terms of, I can't speak specifically to the community gardens, but generally the project and the next big phase of it, they were looking to do sort of timing it commensurate with their next major airport capital project, which is a terminal expansion, because that is triggered.
Terminal, yeah.
Right, that triggers a mandated landscaping budget that then can potentially be both applied to it and then thinking creatively about how do we accelerate it. But from a design and construction, that's sort of the driver of it.
So it's on hold for
A little
now.
bit, yeah.
Okay.
Well, they didn't get the big funding for it. So, but they'll apply again. It's just the FAA ran out of money.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? How will the new counselors receive this information? Will there be an orientation packet or?
You're going to explain it.
Oh, good, great. Yes. The other guy. The two guys.
The two guys. Then at the end.
Yes, staff is working on a more comprehensive orientation than we usually do because majority new council. We would love to talk to the two of you about that in the upcoming weeks to talk about how we provide it in kind of a bite-sized way so it's a little more manageable for folks. But yes, this will be part of their orientation packet.
Well, I think they should have to read every document the city has.
I think so too. And
In
then
a,
have
in
a
a room in the
test
city, they can't leave.
and a
until
little
they-
quiz
And then a
afterwards.
quiz.
Yeah,
Like
maybe we should do that before, and if they fail the quiz,
100 true, false.
they can't, even if they're elected, they can't serve.
Like a
for example,
hyper citizenship
yeah.
test.
Right, yeah.
If a setback is 5 feet against a grandfathered border between two houses that, and a neighbor wants to,
We're going to scare away our
Yeah,
candidates.
Oh, you'll pick it up quick.
Andrew, I think, has a question.
Okay.
I think Andrew has a question.
Oh, yes, Andrew.
Just a couple of things. So the staff person that we're hiring for climate, Jesse, in your mind, does that enable us to provide resources for the items that are now, say, pending in the climate action plan section?
That's a good question. I think yes, to a certain extent, absolutely. A dedicated climate staff can move forward many of these things beyond just that which is listed as pending. I keep getting kicked out of Wi-Fi. Do other people?
No.
No.
So my document just went blank. So short answer is yes. Will they individually be able to single-handedly, fix EV charging stations
No, of
citywide?
course not.
Probably not,
No.
but certainly could put together a strategy that could help move that forward more quickly.
Because what I might also suggest, I am personally aware of lots of resources out there that would help the city on these projects. As UVM students, as interns, as folks that would love to get their hands dirty on a lot of this stuff. I know people reach out to me, and I'd really like for us to work together to figure out, if we're still short staff, how do we leverage those resources in a way that you're comfortable with and that's effective, because those resources are out there to help us move some of these things that are stalled. So that's kind of the first point. And I know we're obviously going to be talking about this after the election with the newly elected councilors, but I do notice that, or maybe I just missed it, we don't have on here the conservation easements for Wheeler and Hubbard as items. You don't think they belong here, or?
They weren't put on during this policies and strategies retreat.
Oh, okay. So just
Wheeler.
I know that. They're things we've been talking about. So.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things that come up. So the Hubbard natural area is on here for complete the design phase and construction. Obviously,
maybe
that
we
has
just
expanded.
add conservation easement to that item, just so we can track it.
So this is part of this tracking tool that I think is that was not, when we did this exercise back in July, the conservation easement wasn't part of the conversation. So the council can always add new things into this.
So we'll have that discussion. You're saying, and when is the new council going to be getting together then to review this document?
So this will be part of the initial orientation on the organizational meeting on Thursday, March 7th. When we do the policies and strategies retreat with the new council is something that I would like to talk to you two about next week. And then obviously talk to the full council about early in March.
Okay, great. I mean, on that, just one point, the city plan already kind of says it, right? So, I mean, it's clearly a policy that the city has, in effect, already adopted to ensure those conservation easements happen, so. Right.
Yes, the city plan has 8 years worth of policy statements, and this is trying to get down to what are we doing this year? We are actively working on both of those.
No, I know you are, and so
You're just reinforcing that at least the current council made that decision. To have that done.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
You're just double checking.
And it would be good to have it on. And it would be good to have it on the list.
And we did that in open session, I believe.
Yeah.
We made that decision.
As we take all of our decisions in open session.
Just remembering back.
Just, it's important to remind the public too.
Is this open session?
Yes.
Maybe too late.
Okay. Other comments or thoughts about priorities and strategies? I love this tool. I think it's really helpful. So, all right. Oh shoot, I didn't do 16, a summary.
Well, it's next. It's next.
It's next.
This is the best part of the night right here.
The summary. Oh, what was the summary?
The summary was that we're going to keep her.
We're going to keep her. She's doing a marvelous job. The evaluation was incredibly positive. You know, that's what it was. I forgot to write something up. I should have had some.
Yeah.
It's just, we had an executive session. You are being transparent to the community. You're not firing me. I'm good.
There
Well
we
done.
go.
No, and the feedback was great
Yeah.
across the board. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a couple areas where, you know, you've identified that you'll work on, but most people that were rated our city manager, no surprise to the public listening, very highly, as did the council.
Yeah. Yeah.
We picked a winner when we picked you 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. So we're happy. Maybe you'll be here when that final TIF bill gets paid.
We'll see.
We hope so.
We'll see.
We hope so. Anyway, all right. 17, we need to convene as the Liquor Control Commission.
Oh, this is Megan's
So,
last
a
motion. to move
motion-
Okay,
into
all
the-
right.
Yeah.
I'll move
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we convene as the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission to consider a slew of
I forgot to count them.
liquor
There's a lot of
licenses.
Second, and we should get samples from all these locations first. Right.
We'll do that Monday. We're going to one of them anyway, Duke's, right? Is that on this list? Maybe not. But anyway.
You have a motion to second.
Okay, motion. We need a second.
Have it. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are now convened as the Liquor Control Commission. And we have a number of first and second class liquor licenses, outdoor consumption permits, tobacco. I would entertain a motion to approve all of them.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Wow, is that the last vote we'll take? Helen?
It is.
No, we still have to come out.
You have to come out.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, that's not a big vote. So I'll move that we come out of the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Is
Wow.
there any other business?
Helen.
Yes.
So I just want to take a moment we're going to obviously celebrate the two of you next week, but I also wanted to just acknowledge, Larry, your service. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's really hard to come on to a group midstream and pick up and carry on, and I think you've done a really admirable job.
Second.
Here, here.
Participating,
Second.
asking great questions.
in progress.
I wanted him to extend his time.
You can always come back.
A little pressure.
Yeah, you did. You've been great.
Perhaps you want to be on a growth management plan task force. Thank you very much for jumping
Thank
on
you,
and helping
Larry.
us.
I do have a question about previous counselors because we were going to be recognizing them. Do we know when that's going to happen?
We have not gotten there
No,
with
we
everything else
haven't done that.
going on.
I'm sorry.
I have not gotten there with everything else going on,
Okay.
and I
okay,
thought it was more important to prioritize you two.
Okay.
Well, thank you. So just final words. This has been one of my favorite jobs. I loved it. It's local. You get stuff done. It doesn't take a long time, most of the time, to really make some significant changes for this community. And that has been extremely gratifying. and I have so enjoyed working with several city managers, or at least two, and and all the different councils. It's been wonderful. It's been an honor to chair them, and I thank you all. It's in some ways really hard to leave, but there's also a time for new voices that are watching us right now, or listening, to provide their wisdom and life experiences to a lot of the decisions that we are faced. And lots of times it's fun and sometimes it's really hard. And I hope that, civility and collaboration, I certainly heard that at the candidates forum. Everyone wants to collaborate. And so I hope that truly happens, because that's how you get to yes, is valuing everyone's opinion and trying to find some either a middle ground, or just you can just disagree respectfully and move on to the next point. So I thank you all.
Yeah.
And I thank you, Megan. You have been wonderful as a vice chair, and really a supporter. I am always in awe of how well you write and speak and express your thoughts. Do your research, and you've brought an enormous amount to the table.
Well, thank
So I
you.
thank you.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank you for being an excellent chair, Helen. I think you've led this community through some really good times, but through lots of choppy waters, and you've done it with grace, you've done it with eloquence, and you've done it with integrity. I want that to be really said. And tonight was another example of that. So I thank you for that. It's not a small job. Democracy is starts at the local level, and it really depends on the people's trust, and that's the weight that's on counselors' shoulders. It's maintaining the people's trust, and we can see that sometimes there are easy jabs that people can make that can perhaps really put people's trust in question, and that just maintaining that integrity is so important, and transparency is the first step towards maintaining that trust. But also just the way you have come forward on many occasions, Helen, and just really laid it out very clearly. You have a mind like it's just a steel trap, and I'm in awe of that. I couldn't come here, and I don't have the steel trap. I would rely on lots of lots of notes, which yeah. So I, like you, this has been an incredible learning experience. I did not have the decades of experience in the State House like you did before. This is my first time in public service, and it's an amazing experience. And it makes me really proud to be a member of this society. And I just hope, and I do pray, that we hang on to it. This is precious. This is so precious, and it's not easy. It's hard work. So I'm glad for the people who are stepping up and taking on that hard work. We need it. And some of us, we just need to have a rest too.
That's right.
Because it is hard work. It is hard work.
Yeah.
So, and I want to thank the staff. The staff has been
Fabulous.
Yeah, really, really fabulous. And we live in a place that is blessed in many ways, and the administration is really one of those things. But I have real affection for the people at this table and in this room, and some of the people in this room have already gone. So it's with a heavy heart to walk away from just this last, these last moments in a meeting, the other business. It's like where we can kind of like and just touch base on a couple of things. It's kind of a special time of the meeting. So anyway, with real affection, and thank you for carrying on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are we gonna do?
No, you will be fine. And you know, Megan and I still live here. Yeah. I mean, people like, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to continue to live here. You know what I mean? I'm still be active. So anyway, all right. So if there's no other business, motion to adjourn.
So moved. And thank you,
All
Channel
in favor?
17.
Adjourn. Thank you.